I'll just point out the changes to the document that you'd received in the original board packet. On the front page, Darla Strigel was extending an offer of employment as a teacher librarian to be assigned to North Cedar, subsequent to that original document being distributed. And this time of year is a dynamic time in the staffing world, so as recently as today we've received 2 resignations, Nevin Conlon and Christy Mantle. And in light of the extension of the school year and to comply with IPA's regulations and the wishes of Ms. Brewer and Ms. Hancock, we've submitted an adjusted termination effective date to the 31st of May of 16 as opposed to the end of the school year, which was the date submitted originally in February. And those are the revisions.
Move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second, thank you. Any questions? All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have a public comment. Any other public comment tonight?
We do, from Mr. Larry Wyckoff.
I'll try to figure this out. Larry Wyckoff, do I talk back here or?
Just this way, that's fine.
All right. Larry Wyckoff, 4241 East Park Road. At the April 4th City Council meeting, I was prevented by your previous school board member, Mayor Jim Brown, from giving my planned speech against the $32.5 million bond referendum due to it not being, quote, germane to Cedar Falls city business. And I was cut off from speaking further. How could it not be germane when Cedar Falls taxpayers are going to have to pay for the bond issue? My first full sentence, not delivered that night, was as follows. Doug Nefsker, Director of Business Affairs for Cedar Falls Schools, said in the February 22nd meeting that last year's expenditures exceeded their revenue. So the referendum was held on 5 April, but I'm willing to bet $1,000 that if Doug and you board members had presented to the public on the 3rd of April that the full tax would be 6.54, rather than hiding it basically from us taxpayers until Sunday the 10th of April in the Sunday paper, the referendum would have never passed. Finally, someone called the Courier and asked if the school trailers could be named after me, Larry Wyckoff. I have no problem in this idea as long as the 4 rooms at Southdale that required almost $500,000 to remodel are named after the Cedar Falls Community School Board to boldly illustrate the waste and mismanagement in spending our tax dollars that you took an oath not to do. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Larry.
The Secretary Financial Report. Doug?
Okay, see if I can find it. There we go. Okay, on the screen and then or on your electronic devices, the Secretary's financial report for the month of April. You can see in the general fund we had total revenues of $10,403,591. Typically, just a reminder for the board that we received the largest amount of property taxes sent to the school district twice a year, once in October and the other in April. So that amount reflects that what I would call the second half of the year draw. In expenditures, you can see the total expenditures $4,769,000 and change. The biggest chunk of that is flow-through money. You'll see the Rivers Hill Consortium at $667,000, almost $668,000. That's flow-through dollars. Those came into the district in the month of March and then were sent out, or the check was sent to the AEA for operating the program in April. It's no cost to the district other than the number of students that Cedar Falls has attending the program. So you can see our ending balance is $13,583,788 rounded, and you can see where we have most of that invested in the savings account with Lincoln. And here's cash flow projections. Again, this is just in the general fund, and you can see where the blue line or the lighter blue line, and we're running pretty consistent where we've been all year long in comparison to the previous 3 school years. So that really is not much of a change. Management fund, again, running very consistent, about where we expected it would be, so that's not really any change or surprises with that as well. In a statewide 1 cent local option sales tax, you can see we had revenue of just under $333,000 for the month, with expenditures of $8,074, plus the transfer to the debt service fund for the revenue bond payment of $252,673 for a total of $267,48. And you can see where the dollars are at associated. Most of those dollars are invested on behalf for the district, and then the box in the corner reminds everybody what's restricted and what's not restricted with those dollars. Physical plant and equipment levy, again, the second half of the year property tax draw came in at $1,304,224. Expenditures of $68,325, so you can see an ending balance of $3,591,706, running very, very similar to where we were 1 year ago. Debt service, there you can see the $252,000 coming in that was transferred from the statewide 1 cent sales tax fund, plus some interest. We have our debt payment June 1st, so there's nothing for the month of April, and you can see the balance of $2,029,464. Student activity, 76,415 in, 58,316 out, for an ending balance of 591,119. And in food service, we're looking at the revenue of 216,407 in, 223,50 out, so $569,000 balance as of the end of June, and we can, or excuse me, as of the end of April, and you can see where we were a year ago, so that we continue to make progress with that particular fund. There's the high school coffee shop, what their activity was for the month of April as well. And with that, I'd entertain any questions from the board.
Any questions for Doug? Hearing none, the financial report will be placed on file for audit.
Thank you.
Communications. We have our student board member, Mark Flancher.
So we have finally gotten a total on our Tiger Trot, how much money we raised for that. It's around $600 we raised. So that will be split between Mrs. Smith's family and then the families during the holidays that we split the money up as well. So that money will be split between them. We had a great staff appreciation breakfast last week on Wednesday, and it featured a nice video with students that our Tiger Highline staff put together. We're talking about different staff members, teachers, custodians, secretaries, the things we love about our staff. So that was a nice highlight of our breakfast. And then our blood drive is this Wednesday at the high school. It's going to be all day, and students are signing up for that, and health passes are ready to be sent out for our annual blood drive. This past Saturday, we had large group music contest held in Cedar Falls. We had many Division I ratings across all our ensembles. And then next week we have a busy week for concerts. Monday, the choir concert on the 16th, orchestra on the 17th, and then band on the 18th. So back-to-back concerts to attend. And then men's track, we are Valley Division champions, and then also 4x800 champions at the Drake Relays. So exciting stuff with track. And then women's tennis victory over Dubuque Senior last week, and as well women's golf won their super meet last week. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. is the honors convocation at the high school in the auditorium for scholarships, awards, other recognitions. And then seniors, our last day is the 19th, and we have 8 days left. Have our big countdown in the hallway with commencement on the 22nd. So that is very exciting. And as this is my last report to the board, I would like to thank Dr. Petit and the board for the opportunity to serve as student board member this past school year. It's been an honor to represent the students and to learn from you lessons about leadership and service to community. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael, we are so appreciative of you giving your time twice a month, and also all the extracurricular things that you report to us and bring to our board. And we appreciate your leadership, and hopefully this experience will bode well for you. And with that in mind, I'd like to offer you this appreciation certificate. It certifies, it's awarded to Michael Flancha in grateful appreciation and recognition for your faithful service as a student board member of the Cedar Falls Board of Education by the Cedar Falls Community Schools.
Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. This is also the School Board Appreciation Month, and at your table there is a certificate as a sign of appreciation, not only from ISAB, but all of us across the district to say thank you. A lot of people do not know that this is a completely volunteer role that you are partaking in, and the time that you devote to our students is second to none. So we greatly appreciate your work. We thank you for your work, and certainly are excited about each of you in this leadership role. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Fit for
framing. And I apologize, Michael's was framed and yours is not.
Keep it under $3. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Time for our informational report, and Pam, will you start that for us tonight?
Yep, Dan and I are going to start out together. So, Doug, can you pull up the PowerPoint?
Oh, which one?
The one with the tan background.
This one.
Yes, very good.
There we go.
Thank you.
Here's the record, but I think on this one,
So we're really lucky tonight that we have several schools here that are going to share with you some of the information that's been happening in the buildings. But right now, Dan and I are just going to provide just a brief intro before they do that.
Yeah, the majority of you have heard us talk about our professional learning communities before, and so we're not going to go into a lot of detail about what they are and those kind of things. Just to give you a quick refresher of some of the focus that we've had now going on 5 years in our school district with our professional learning community. Can you get that to be
Download it, yeah, right, the down arrow.
Yep, it's not downloaded, is it? Okay.
there we go.
Now you got to open.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So basically, if we had to give an official definition of what a professional learning community is, of course, this would be what it would be. It's composed of collaborative teams, which were made up of a lot of collaborative teams across our school districts, whose members work interdependently to achieve common goals for which they are mutually accountable. I think there's a couple things in that definition. And one of them is interdependently. It's an expectation of all of our teachers that they work together and they rely on each other to be successful in the student goals that they've set. And then the last part of that is mutually accountable. It's not just enough to be on a team. They need to be participating in and be accountable for the students' achievements as a result of that. And I think over the 5 years that we've now been working on our professional learning community, we have gone a long way into making that happen. And you're going to see some great examples tonight from some of our teachers of how our kids are benefiting because of that.
And many times you'll hear us use the word all students. These are all our students, and that's really important to us.
And I think that's reflected in the three big ideas where we really focus on learning. And we'll talk a little more about that in a second. Our collaborative culture, as we're especially this year with our TLC grant that we received, we are hiring a lot of new people within our school district. And the things that we're hiring, one of the most important qualities that we're looking for in people is that collaboration. Do they have that ability to work with other people and not want to be a silo in a classroom? And then the last one, of course, is that focus on results. We continue to look at results not just of our Iowa assessments or our FAST, our district-wide assessments, but on our common summative and formative assessments within the classroom to make sure that our students are truly learning. And these you've seen before. These are the 4 critical questions that really drive everything that we do, whether it's in a building or in the classroom or across the district. And that first one is, what do we want our students to learn? That's the curriculum piece. That's the standards. That's the expectations that we have that we want our students to learn, the skills that they need. How will we know if they're learning? That's the assessment piece that we work on day in and day out, and we analyze those assessments. How do we respond if students don't learn? That's the intervention side. Do we really make sure that we're providing students with that support? That's the reason we have intervention time in our elementaries, the reason we have Tiger time in our junior highs and the power hour at the high school, is to provide those enrichment and intervention opportunities. And then when I said enrichment, that's our fourth critical question. We have a number of students, because we are a high achieving district, we have a number of students that as they come through our system already have a lot of skills. And they have a lot of the knowledge that we're trying to partake on them with students. And so we need to make sure that we're stretching those kids. What are we doing to enrich those students' experiences while they're in school? And that's again the beauty of our power hour, our Tiger time, our interventions. Is it's not solely on the students that haven't got there yet. It's on those students that have already learned it and need to go deeper and farther. We're not going to spend a lot of time on how we're doing that, but we do have some data that we collect from a district-wide perspective, and I'll have Pam kind of talk a little bit about the critical issues survey.
In October 2012, we started issuing the critical issues survey with all of our staff. And we asked the staff to complete it individually because they have the collaborative time, but we want to know how each individual feels they're doing as a collaborative team. So there are actually 20 questions that the staff participate in, and we do it every fall and every spring. And on those questions, they decide whether they're not yet there, they're making progress, or yay, we've already got it, we're there. And by looking at that data, we determine the district SMART goals. As we always do, there's 3 areas where we set SMART goals, and one of those is in the area of the PLCs. Dan earlier talked about a focus on learning, and it's not just a focus on learning for our students, but also for our staff as well. So this last year, whoops, can you go back one more? This last year, we set 2 SMART goals based on our critical issues survey. And one of those was question 14, which talks about using the results of our common formative and summative assessments. And I'm sure Tara's group, I believe, is going to be highlighting that later. And so we use that data to inform what we're doing. And last spring, we were at 70% district-wide, and our SMART goal is that by May of this year, we're going to be at 85%. We did actually have the teachers take the survey, and we're going to be sharing that data with you at our retreat in June. We have made some progress, and we just haven't crunched all the data yet, but we will have it broken down also by elementary, junior high, and secondary too. And so you can see the growth area in all of those. And then our second goal area is how we're going to sequence our courses and establish pacing guides. And we're still working on these areas, and we'll have the report again in June. At the elementary, we know we're not there in social studies yet because the state is working at adjusting the Common Core for social studies, and we do have the Iowa Core now in science, and so the elementary has started working in that area. We're not there yet, but we're hoping to be there next year.
So really tonight, it's not about us talking. It's about getting you an opportunity to listen to some of our teachers and some of the great work that they're doing. We have that opportunity to be able to observe that during the course of the year. And you've had some opportunities when you visited our buildings, but we want to showcase some of the things that are going on. So we have teams from elementary, junior high, and high school here that are going to talk a little bit about how are they using the PLC process in their classrooms and how it's benefiting kids. So do we want to start with elementary?
Yep, we're going to start with Southdale, and that's the blue. Good, thanks, Doug. And that's the blue one. So if the Southdale staff could come forward.
I told Jason you were going to save the best for last. Now,
sorry. We're just going to set the expectations really high. Are you guys comfortable?
Yep. So I brought our 3rd grade collaborative team, and this is they'll introduce themselves when they get to their part of the slideshow. But this is really a good demonstration of our 3rd grade team consists of 4 3rd grade teachers, but more than just that, because every faculty member belongs to a collaborative team. And so in this particular team, we also have a special ed team member, and we also have our reading teacher, because that's every faculty member belongs to a team somewhere in the building. So this is a demonstration of our special ed teachers select the team that's appropriate for them, and they can talk about that in just a moment. So in the administrator group, but I got asked to talk about the journey that we have taken since the trip to Phoenix. So we started with 15 staff members. There were mostly teachers, but a few of us were administrators as well. And we went to Phoenix for the initial PLC summit, just to learn what the PLC was all about. And so the history part of that is, and I see a lot of our Phoenix 15 here, Megan was, and Jason was, and we had a great time, not getting there, but once we got there, we had a great time. Actually, we had a horrible time getting there, but I think it brought us together more as a team because we actually hung out for
9 hours.
9 hours in Minneapolis.
9-hour layover between.
But it did bring us closer together, and I think that we wouldn't have planned it that way, but we really grew together. We had to kind of use humor to help us with those travels, and we became known as the Phoenix 15 because of the 15 members of that team. That's what we called ourselves. And while we were there, we learned a lot. I was going to bring a Learning by Doing book, but we all received a copy of the Learning by Doing book, and that was the first time that staff members had been given that book, was at this conference or at this summit. And when we started to read it, started to go to the sessions there at the Phoenix Summit, we learned about, and this is kind of repetitive of what Dan said, the 3 focus areas were collaboration, learning, and results. And we said, if we really want to focus on those things, those 3 areas, we need the collaboration to get to the learning and the results. And so that Phoenix 15 group came back, met frequently after we came back, and the teachers on that team really spoke out and said, if this district is really going to commit to this, we have to have the time that will allow us as teachers to do this. And hence the early outs and the late starts became part of our schedule here in Cedar Falls. We'd already had the early out in elementary, but we made it even a little bit earlier than it used to be, because we said we're not going to replace it. We want to add to that early out to make sure that we got that collaboration done. And the late starts then that following year started at the secondary, and we thank the board for that because we know that wasn't easy. We were worried about the public looking at us and saying, now you're teaching less, and we weren't. We were actually using our time a bit more wisely. All staff then that fall were given the Learning by Doing book, and then the discussion between Rick Dufour talks about you have to decide what you want to be tight and what you want to be loose. And so we started that dialogue about what's tight and what's loose. And the first steps that we started at the elementary level was everyone needed to be part of a collaborative team. That's why our reading teacher, who doesn't have another reading teacher in our building, is on the third team. So that's what we talked about with that. And that we talk about that hour as being sacred. We honor it. The minutes are to be taken, and we focus on the 4 questions that Dan already talked about. The next steps for TIGHT were we needed intervention time. If we were truly looking at the 4 critical questions that Dan alluded to and I had on the previous slide, it meant instead of just testing and saying, okay, they didn't get it, move on to the next chapter because that's part of my curriculum and I got to keep moving, we said we needed that intervention time to say, to reteach, redo, and they'll talk about as a team what they've done with that intervention time and the fact that all the kids become our kids. It's not just my class. You know, when I taught, I very much taught with my class. These were my 25 6th graders, and I looked at their data and tried to do what I could with my class, but I didn't collaborate with my partners 10 years ago when I was a teacher in Cedar Falls. We started the journey with math. We decided that would be the best way at the elementary was to learn the process of becoming a professional learning community, but learning with a curriculum area that was more black and white. And that, we think, was a very good decision. We then added, a few years, 2 years later, we added ELA, which we discovered was more difficult because it's not quite as black and white, and there are judgment calls in ELA that made it a little bit harder for us to really define our data cleanly. Would you say? And then loose, these are just examples of loose, what the loose were. You could decide as a team how many CFAs you were creating. The types of norms and purpose statement, you had to create them, but you had as a team, had the freedom to create your own norms and purpose statements. How we collected and showed our data, every team collects and shows their data differently at Southdale, so we weren't going to be picky about that. We just wanted them collecting and showing the data and showing us what we were doing. Originally, when we started way back when, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, how long have we been on this journey? We read the book, Learning by Doing, and at Orchard Hill, which is where I was at the time, we decided which chapters we wanted to read which week, as long as by the end of the year we got through the book. So we left it up to the teams to decide. So those are examples of the tight and the loose that we started with. And then we measured our progress by a number of different ways, all related back to the data piece. Pam already referred to the critical issue survey, which is given twice a year. That was one example of how we measure our progress. Benchmark data, FAST data, CFAs aligned to our curriculum, which are all tied into our 4 critical questions. You know, what do we do if we assess and kids already know before we've even taught it? Let's not have them sit through it. Let's do something with those kids. As well as let's reteach and try to reach those kids in a better way that didn't get the concepts the first time around. And then all of the buildings, once again, Pam and Dan referred to that, all of the buildings write SMART goals, and that has developed into not only SMART goals for the district, but then SMART goals for the building, which our leadership team creates for the building. And then every one of our grade levels, every one of our collaborative teams creates SMART goals, and we don't do it in isolation. Our building SMART goals fit with the district SMART goals. Our grade level SMART goals fit with our building SMART goals. So that we're not, one group isn't doing this and another group isn't doing that. So we really try to align ourselves because we all need each other's help. Every grade level helps in our building reaching their SMART goal. So why make it be something totally different? And professional learning communities are not just a time. They're not just that collaborative team time. It's who we are. It's not a time or a place. It's what we do on a daily basis, and that includes acceleration, enrichment, reteaching, and sharing of students. They'll talk a little bit more about that. And the data is about all of our students and not just your students and my students. Who wants the control? Do you want me to slide?
You can.
Okay. Take control. So they're going to introduce themselves.
My name's Jen Berry. I'm Jenny Meskey. I'm Liz Evansberger, and I teach the special education for 3rd and 4th. I'm Kitty Chermo.
Tammy Broneman, the reading teacher, grades K through 3.
And Lisa Dunmore. Okay, well, since we all don't get to go to Phoenix to the summit, some of us have had the opportunity to go to the PLC Institute in Minnesota. 4 out of our 6 team members have gone, and the other 2 are ready to go whenever it's offered again. So we traveled up to Minnesota. It's a 3-day, 2.5-day, where we attend meetings, presentations, and then we do outreach. Like, we get to go to different breakout sessions. And although we don't get to attend all of them, we would come back as a team at the end of the night and just discuss everything we've learned. It's such an eye-opening experience, and it's a lot to take in. And so I felt like when we got to sit down, we didn't feel like we missed out on all those breakout sessions because we were hearing really great things from everyone. And then we were able to come back to our buildings then and share it at faculty meetings at the beginning of the year. And then we were able to then say, okay, what do we want this year as our groups to work on? Because you don't want to overwhelm somebody and say, do X, Y, Z, and then this and this and this on top of that. So we come back and say, this is what we learned this year, and this is what we really want to improve on. And although 4 of us have gone, I would say every year the focus is different. So the year I went, it was having kids understand what they were learning and being able to see it. Where I know when Jenny went, the focus was more on, okay, how do we break up assessments and look at skills? So it's so different every year. So it's great that we were able to go and bring back that data and information.
So how do we plan for our meetings? We have decided that it'd be a good idea to create an agenda that we put out to our team members ahead of time. So it goes out a day or two before. And then we can add to it things that we need. Do you want to...
Can you click on the sample? Click on that sample agenda.
So we then have a facilitator, recorder, task manager, timekeeper, and we make sure we rotate those roles. Our SMART goals are always posted there to just make sure that it's a constant reminder that we're always talking about it. And then if you scroll down, then we are all on committees, and so this is a time for us to share out on our committees, and if they met, what information we need to take back to each other and talk about. Our 4 critical questions are always there again for us to look back and as a reminder so we can talk about that. And then we have all of our core subjects that we have listed, and then we talk about what we're going to be doing as far as planning and meeting interventions, and so keeping us on the same page.
You can close that out. We'll go to the next one.
Oops.
Yep.
Wait a minute. Cal-
Can you click on the PowerPoint below, Doug, the P on the bottom?
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Okay, so what do our meetings look like? At the beginning of the year, when we first got together back into the groove of school, we established our norms and we wrote a purpose statement. And we have that posted in the room where we meet every week. But again, we meet more than just during our CCT. And it's hard to see that right there, but it has our purpose statement at the top and then underneath our norms. And then we have calendars also where we can jot down things that we know are going to be important to the team and to the grade level and to the building. So it's always there for us to see. One thing that we looked at the beginning of this year is before our norms tended to be focused more on our professional responsibilities, such as we're going to start on time, we're going to end on time. And this year we really worked hard to deepen it and look more at, I guess, the process that we were going to take in order to meet at our purpose for meeting. So we looked at things such as we're all going to contribute, we're all going to collaborate, we all have strengths, we all have things to offer, that everyone's opinion is important and needs to be heard, and we're going to let everybody put their ideas on the table before making a decision, and we would make it together. And I think it took a lot at the beginning for all of the teams in our building to just, you have to really trust each other. You have to be able to have faith in each other and trust that what you say is going to be confidential and that we can work together and build. So basically, when we have that established, then we review it at every meeting, and then a couple times a year we look back to and talk about, is there anything we need to change? Do we need to add something or change it? Maybe it's not working. And then we follow the agenda that Jen was talking about, and basically our data analysis or our common formative assessments really drive our discussions throughout the meeting. And we alternate those roles that Jen had talked about also.
So in our meetings, we focus on those 4 critical questions that we've learned about that PLCs do, and we look at each student. And over the past years, we've learned to write our own common formative assessments and summative assessments to be able to look at students' needs. The big thing that I think has happened over these years, I know as a teacher, having taught quite a few years, I looked at the kids being the kids in my room, the ones that were assigned to me. I'm going to do what I need to do to get them where they need to be. But I think the most powerful thing that's happened and our PLC is that we look at our kiddos as all our kids. Our entire third grade class is now the kids that we try to make sure are achieving. I'm not just looking at my own kids, but I'm looking at the whole group. We're going to talk about how we have met their needs by using that intervention time and using each of our strengths to be able to move kids around instead of me trying to meet different learning needs like fluency, comprehension. Maybe they need a little bit more in inferencing. I'm able to shift some of my kids to another teacher who can focus on their needs. I can take some of their children and try to work on that particular skill. I think it has not been an overnight awareness that, you know, they all belong to us. It's taken time, but I think it's one of the most powerful things that we've learned. And as being one of the two members that I haven't been to PLC training yet, I see so many great things that I've learned from my teammates. And I know Jen and I are looking forward to going to training and bringing back our own ahas and bring it back to make our team better.
Okay, so recently with our intervention time, that's been one of our biggest changes. At the beginning of the year, for about the first half of the year, each third grade teacher was kind of trying to meet those needs within their own room, like Lisa said. So she was trying to give interventions for kids that needed comprehension and give interventions for kids who needed fluency and phrasing and all of these things, and it became too much. So then in the winter, after our assessments from the state came through, can you click on the sample interventions group for me, please? Thank you. We were able to use our winter data, and we put every child down on there that was in third grade, and we looked at their fall scores to their winter scores. And we really looked closely at the kids that were red on that winter CBM because we knew they weren't meeting that state benchmark and were at risk to not be proficient by the end of third grade. So we took every one of those kids that were in that boat and we said, okay, this tells us they couldn't read the correct number of words in a minute that the state has set for a goal for us. But why can't they read it? So we looked a lot more deeply at those kids. We looked at a lot more of the informal assessments that the classroom teachers have been doing and their formative data and said, well, you know, I think this child's not reading all these words because they're really not understanding what they're reading. So they're having to slow down their thinking so much to gain meaning that they can't read that. Or this child just isn't decoding yet at a third grade level that's expected. So they need some decoding strategies. Or this child really kind of has the comprehension and the decoding down, but they don't get how to phrase things quite right. So we broke it down that way. And then we said, well, how can we still meet all these needs? And we started thinking, and Mrs. Evansberger already had her special ed kids out at that intervention time. And while I was serving third graders, I didn't have them during the intervention block. So I said, well, let's give me another WIN intervention group, what I need. And then each of the third grade teachers took one, and we also assigned a group to our paraeducator that's in third grade, who happens to be a certified teacher. So we're very fortunate. And so we were actually then able to make like 7 different intervention groups, all based on this data and really serve those kids' needs. So that was one of our biggest changes this year.
So obviously we know as teachers what we're kind of creating for the kids or hoping to improve for the kids, but we also wanted some communication to go between students, teachers and students, and then teachers and parents. And so something that we've kind of put together this year are some ICAM statements that really just kind of bring to the forefront of the kids' minds, what are we working on, what are the core skills that third graders should or be close to understanding, and we reflect on these not only like in our daily teaching, we talk about what we're learning and why we're learning it, but then after assessments and formative assessments and summative assessments, we reflect with the kids not just on their score, but after interventions perhaps, or revisiting those
essential skills where they are in their learning. So it's just, it seems to me that this year my kids are more aware of what they know and what they don't know. And they have these personal goals for themselves. It's not me saying, oh, you've missed those 2 questions. They know, oh, I don't understand time to the 5 minutes. It's like they just can verbalize to themselves, to me, to their parents, and that really comes through in our parent-teacher or our student-led conferences. And you don't have to click on it, but there's just some samples of an I can statement. Or you can. So it's just, and this is after our formative assessments, our post-test at the end of the topic, but for math especially, it's really concrete for them to understand. They can look right at their test scores because we correlated it with the test question numbers. So they really, it's kind of a no-brainer for the kids to see where they are in their own learning. And it's color-coded, which kids love.
And it helps us. And I can statements, I think, was what Kitty brought back a couple of years ago, and then, but another year, the norms and purpose statement was what somebody brought back from the conference as well. So every year somebody brings back something different.
Thank you.
And now we have Hanson. And that's the one with the little bus.
I'm the queen of the cute PowerPoint.
Yes, she is.
It's this
Yep.
I'm Tara Estep. I'm the principal at Hanson. I'm Michelle DeGabriel. I teach 5th grade.
I'm Jill Schulte. I teach 2nd.
And we are going to talk to you quickly about our MTSS journey. MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. You may have also heard it called RTI, Response to Intervention, or prior to that, IDM, Instructional Decision Making, because we just love acronyms in education. So about 6 years ago, actually almost 7 years ago, we started a journey. Our leadership team was looking at data, and we said, hey, look, we're kind of staying stagnant. We're not going where we want to go, especially our high kids. They're kind of staying in the same spot. We need to do something. In comes at the time called instructional decision making. It was a framework to meet every single kid's needs. And that's why we went. We started that year with leadership going to training. We went once a month to training, brought that back to staff, and all we said to staff was, hey, go along with us for this ride. And an invitation to learn, and there was no expectation for implementation, but by the end of the year, 100% implementation, because it was just the right thing, and it was the right thing for kids.
Exactly.
And we also learned about SMART goals at that time. That kind of went with the IDM, and Tara brought that to our knowledge, and so we started that before the district even hopped on board with that, and it was great because we had a clear focus. It was measurable. We knew what we wanted our kids to achieve, and we used the data that we got to get there.
And it really started to focus our instruction because it was like, this is what we want our kids to know. And this is how we know they know it. And so we kind of got rid of some fluff that maybe we didn't need to be teaching.
And the foundation of all of it, we developed a shared vision together. How do you know where you're going if you haven't had that conversation? So we developed a shared vision. We worked on that all year long, and that became our foundation in our culture. So what is MTSS? It's a focus on all the kids. You know, they come to us. We don't get a class of kids that they all know the same things. We've got some high, we've got some low, and we take them where they're at, and our goal is to get all of them to achieve those 5th grade standards by the end of the year, 2nd grade.
And the beauty of it is when we look at our data, it's like, if Michelle and I are on the same team, it's like, wow, Michelle, your kids totally know how to count money, and my kids don't. You did something there that I didn't do. You can work with my low kids that don't quite have it, because I didn't get it, and you did. So you take my low kids and see if they can get that, and I'm going to take the kids that are there, keep on working with them, or maybe I'm going to take the highs and enrich it a little bit more without doing pre-teaching. That's the big part about with the highs. We're not just pushing them, we're pushing everybody. We're pulling everybody up to the same point.
Gone are the days that we give the high kids a packet. Go do more work. Here's a challenge packet. That doesn't happen anymore. We're going deeper, not wider. And this graphic just kind of shows you that our core, which is our essential skills, that should meet 80% of the kids. and their needs. But then we have the low, the targeted, and then the real intensive kids that are maybe a couple grades below where they need to be, and the same thing on the higher end. So using our data, we can know what all the kids need, and we also use our PLC time to make some pre-screens. So then we know who knows it. They don't need to sit through instruction and do the assignment out of the book when they already know it. So we can use that time to create enrichment things and also intervention.
Right, and the beauty of that too is those are fluid groups. You don't stay in a group because those common formative CFAs, common formative assessments are happening all the time. They're quick and dirty. What do our kids know? So you are moving all the time. And the teachers are moving too. Like, so Michelle did really good teaching money, but I did amazing teaching problem solving. So I'm going to take the lows. I did. So I'm going to take the lows for that. So the kids never really know. Like, oh, I didn't get that. I got to go to Mrs. Schulte. They don't know because we're always mixing it up for them and for us.
And the beauty also is that the kids know that all of us are there to help them achieve those 5th grade standards. Right. They have all the I can statements in their data notebooks. We check them off, a different colored pencil with each trimester. And, we have class celebrations. Everybody met all the essential skills for the 2nd trimester, and they're excited. And they just know that we are here as a support team for them.
Exactly. And it's not a secret anymore what we want them to know. I don't think we always told kids, this is what we expect you to learn. Now they know. It's not a secret. They know when they've got it and what they need to work on.
And in PLCs, we also create, this is what it should look like. So it's not a big mystery.
Right.
You have to meet these criteria, and this is an example of what it could look like.
Yeah, this is how we know you met it. Exactly.
So I think this shows how you can't talk about MTSS or RTI without talking about PLC. It's not possible. This is just a way to show that they go hand in hand. We use that collaborative team time to make these decisions for our RTI groups. And it just works. So at Hanson, when in trying to think about how to show you where does MTSS fit in, I think about our building, and the foundation is the culture. It's everything that we do with our kids. It's that shared vision that we developed, that we're constantly looking at. It's our Hanson Ambassadors leadership. It's our mindset training. It's all of those kinds of things.
Student goal setting,
all of that. And then on top of that, to be able to make PLC and MTSS work, you have to have that culture. But PLC and MTSS is a partnership. You can't have one without the other. PLC is the driving force to be able to do that work with the interventions and the enrichment. And then at the top, what do you want? You want your kids to be engaged. You want them to have those 4 C's, that creativity, collaboration, critical thinking. What did I miss? Communication. Making sure we're infusing those into our lessons so that, boom, we've got that student achievement. And that's what we're always going for. And so what do our results say? After 5 years, you can kind of see here, the dark pink is the not proficient. So you want to see that go down. And you want to see the light 2 shades of pink above that increase. And so you're going to see that. Last year in reading, we were about 95% proficient. And the lightest shade of pink is advanced proficiency. So we were about 48% advanced proficiency last year. And again, over 5 years, you want to see those top 2 shades increase and the bottom decrease.
Which is good because we want to see our high kids moving. And that shows you that what we're doing in PLC and MTSS, it's working.
It's helping every child.
Yeah.
We talk about skill by skill, student by student. I'm sure you've heard that over and over and over because it is so true. It's skill by skill, student by student. It's an individualized approach to education for our kids. Just because you're 9 doesn't mean you're at the 4th grade level. You are all over the place depending on the concept with math, depending on where you're at with reading, and our job is to meet you there.
So thank you for Wednesdays, because what we do is we make common formative assessments so we always know what our kids know. And we create assessments that maybe don't match what we're teaching because the kids have shown us that they need something else.
And sometimes the book that we get is a resource and the assessments don't always match the core, or it's all multiple choice. And so we want it more open-ended, the higher level thinking. And so we use that Wednesday time in order to do those things. And like she was talking about how, I may be really good at teaching that. We talked about what's research-based strategies are you using that I must have missed out on. But we have those conversations and you have time for that.
So we're not just making our kids better, we're making our teaching better, which is amazing. So thank you.
You know, and in the end, we're pretty proud of our data. We're pretty proud of our student achievement, but this is what we're most proud of. You know, I love this quote. Learn that people will forget about what you said, they'll forget about what you did, but they're never going to forget about how you made them feel. And it's our job every single day to make sure that our kids feel cared for, that make sure that they get what they need. And that is, in that academic world, the Just Right Math, the Just Right Reading, MTSS, and all the other stuff that we do. So it's people like these two ladies and all of these teachers out here that are doing it all. So thank you. Questions that you have?
Thank you. I had a question. I think maybe our PLCs also reflects how that 95% is going up. You're getting
Absolutely.
students that are prepared through this thinking and teaching process. How do you pull a new teacher into your collaborative team?
We're going to have 8 next year, Dr. Kenyon, so we're excited about that. But go ahead.
That's a really interesting question because I taught first grade with the same team for a lot of years, and then that team was retiring, part of them. So I moved to second as new to that grade level with one of the Phoenix 15, and I had a little bit of knowledge of PLC, and so it was a new team, and we just dug in. I mean, an hour's not enough. We appreciate that hour so much, but we dug in. We stayed till 6 o'clock at night. We figured out what was going on, what was best for our kids. And then the next year we had a new team member. And the next year we had a new team member. I've had a new team, not the last 2 years, but like maybe 5 years before that. And it works because the team that's already there, we know our kids better than we've known them. We cannot go back. We just can't.
And you know you have to work together,
Yeah.
too. And I would say to you, we made a commitment to stay focused on the right work.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the right work. And if it's not in our vision, we have to question why we're doing it. So we've stayed committed to this. And I would say, Jim, too, that Pam talked about our critical issue surveys. We have seen almost the exact same trend with our PLC critical issue surveys as we have with our student achievement. So those have increased over the last 5 years, as have our student achievement, and so we feel like that's a pretty good tie.
And we like to refer to it as job-embedded professional development. When we have new teachers, Dan and I sit down for maybe, an hour or so at the beginning of the year and just do a brief overview. But it's really the teams that work together, they collaborate together, and really bring each other on board.
And they know the data they need to bring to the meetings every week, so that makes it easy too.
And it also helps that we have, the I can statements for the students, but teachers come in knowing exactly what these kids need to master in each subject. Social science is coming.
I had another question.
Oh, right.
Okay, that was the question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So-
you.
Megan, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm the pink square.
Not literally.
No. Well, and it feels kind of funny to present just by myself. Jennifer she's not feeling well, so I am presenting on her behalf. And, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, so many people have mentioned the purpose statement. So here is our English PLC purpose statement, and this was developed 789. So it's really our English department PLC purpose statement, and it was one of the first things we did when we started on this journey. And so we spent a lot of time wordsmithing and making sure it said exactly what we wanted it to say. And like others have mentioned, we keep it in front of our eyes all through the year to make sure that we are doing the right work. All right, so what we decided to do was to take the 4 critical questions of PLCs and just kind of show you how we work through that process. So what is it we want students to learn? What you're seeing here is the essential skills and concepts for 8th grade English for reading. And so this, again, was the early work of PLC. It came at the perfect time because it was the time that the Iowa Core was coming and being implemented. And PLCs gave us a vehicle to really dig into the core and study it and analyze it and decide what was essential. So what did kids need to know this year in my class, in next year's English class, but also what English skills do they need to have in science class and social studies. And so when you go through all of that, you end up with your essential skills and concepts. If you notice, reading strategies, we picked 4 to really hone in on. And the making inferences one was important for us, but our science teachers were sharing at BLT that that was a weak area on Iowa assessment as well. So that felt good to have something that we could help science as well. The asterisk on some of these skills are things that we, throughout the year, meet with Pete to look at. And so 4 times a year we have students read something, different type of reading each time. We determine how well they're understanding what they read, and then they have to write something that requires them to infer and then support it by citing textual evidence. And so we decided this year those were our biggest rocks that we wanted to track, quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when we've met each quarter to look at the results, it's just so interesting because my students missed the same question that they did at Pete. You know, it was just, we couldn't wait to get together. Was it number 8? Yes, it was number 8. And oh my gosh, what is it about that question? And sometimes it was the question, how it was written. Sometimes it was, oh yeah, we didn't cover that. So anyway, it wasn't punitive for the students. And I always told them, you know, you're just taking this really for us to find out where we're at overall, 8th graders overall. Okay, so then the writing. A shift for us was originally we picked 1 type of writing per grade level to really be the one that we focused on. So 7th grade had narrative, 8th grade had informative, and 9th grade had argument. And then we decided, no, that wasn't good. They need all three years. And we adopted the Lucy Culkin's writing, which the elementaries are using. So eventually K-8, that will be up and running. We used our TSS time last year with our 8th grade teachers at Pete to develop common writing rubrics. So we use the same rubric for information and argument and narrative. They're kind of the bare bones, and they're on Google Docs, so we can make a copy of it, keep the bare bones, but then build on it a little bit as we need to, or change the wording, because sometimes you might call it something different. So we make it very classroom specific, but we have those same essentials together. I'm forgetting to even use my notes here. You see some of the rubrics are linked there, and you don't have to click on that. We have started, our goal is to have a rubric or a proficiency scale for every single essential skill and concept. So I think we have about 6 or 7 at this point. And as we move down the path of standards-based grading or learning-based assessment or whatever you want to call it, our learning will increase and we'll have a better sense of how to write those because they are pretty basic at this point. Okay, so let's take this one about writing informative text and kind of go through the process with it. So this was a unit that we did recently, and I realize that that's tiny. So this takes us to the second question: how will we know if a student has learned it? So with the informative writing standard, along the left-hand side there are all the things about a lead for your introduction and a preview statement, like all of the things that another teacher had talked about, that student-friendly language, the words that we use in class during instruction. And so, like the little check boxes for the lead, we talk about different types of leads you can use when you're writing informative text. And so these are like, oh yeah, I used the dialogue option or whatever, and they check it. So it kind of clues them in, this is what we're talking about. And then as you move over, there's the not yet column, the proficient column, and the advanced column, and the evidence column. So the evidence column is where the students put, like they would write their lead in that box. Or they could copy paste it. I've had them highlight it. I mean, it doesn't always have to be on here, but that's where they're saying, here it is, you know? And then the not yet column, if they are off target, it's not yet, I give them feedback. A lot of times it's written feedback. Sometimes it's one-on-one, just conversation. But they need something, written or spoken, either way. Proficient or advanced, I would just check that. And so they might be proficient on their lead, but their preview statement. So you can get very, very specific about the type of feedback that you give them. All right, so that's more parts of the paper. All right, so how will we respond if they don't learn it? These are notes. I just grabbed my Tiger Time legal pad, and this is nothing pretty at all. But so here's an example of a typical page from my legal pad when I schedule kids for Tiger Time. So you can see the date there and some students and like what it was that I needed to work on. So introduction and conclusion with a student. Another student needed some help with their conclusion. So I'm bringing them in. I know exactly what it is that I need to go over because I'm using this document. So when they come in, I have this. And so I know exactly what we need to go over. Sometimes an intervention is just a little more time. Sometimes it's explaining it another way. Sometimes they need to show their learning in a different way. So I might just have them talk to me and I listen. It doesn't always have to be typed out at that moment. I can still kind of see where they're at in different ways. Okay, so how do we extend and enrich the learning for students who have demonstrated proficiency? So when we were working on this rubric, we added the advanced column. And this is a little above and beyond proficient. And so this is a start to this process. We know that there's a lot more to this. And this is definitely a goal area for us to further extend for students that already know how to do this. But it's a start. So we'll continue to work with our talented and gifted teacher and brainstorm ideas. Goodness, it's going out. Okay, but that's a start. Okay, so student achievement impacts. What this is just a snapshot because Jen is just finishing up the unit. I've kind of moved on from it, and so we just grabbed like a sample of 22 packets and then look to see where the kids were. And so you can see that based on all of the rubrics, so for the introduction, goodness sakes, you can see that there are more students in the proficient and advanced than there are in the not yet. And we call it not yet, which I love. It's not not proficient. It's not yet because we're not done until it is proficient, if not advanced. So that's the beauty of it too. So the reason why there are numbers in the not yet is because she's not quite finished with the intervention with those students. But if she were, then everybody would be in the green or the blue. And I think that's really the power of PLC is that you don't stop until you get every single one of them moved. And that can be very challenging because at our level, well, at all levels, you have what's called intentional non-learners, the ones that don't you dare teach me, and that can be, or students that are absent a lot, all of those sorts of things, so that there are lots of different reasons for that. Okay, so another achievement impact I thought would be important to show. So Doug, if you would click on Sophia's informational book. This is the end result of this informational book. Okay, so if you just click the right arrow to kind of click through. So what they did was they took a topic and broke it down, and then they had to, you can keep going, they had to think about how they would break that topic down, what they, text structures and text features, so not only how it's written using the 6 main text structures, but what it looks like. And so she did a great job with colors and text features, making the pictures and just everything come together. And so I had, some of the students wanted these printed, and the AEA was great about getting those printed for us. And when they came, they were just so excited, like they were all on their desks as they came in, and oh my gosh. And so the smiles on their faces were also achievement data that I appreciate. I think that's everything. Or no, it is not. Okay. All right, and then, yeah, we can just go to the next one. Or, okay. This is just another one. Just click through. This is another student. So in terms of his text features, holy cow! The time that he spent on making all of those, because they were all. So he did a great job with that. What's that?
Do they hire out?
I know.
I might have a project for them.
And it's a challenge with that because it is such a huge project that you have to break it down too. And so on the one hand, I have checks for them, like you should have this many pages of rough draft completed, but then they also have to have all the other stuff. And so it is a challenge. So we just break it down, and it takes pretty much the whole quarter, but they did a great job. All right, so we can go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, that's me. Sorry. Okay, so next steps to continue determining proficiency levels. So like I said, for every essential skill and concept, we know what advanced, proficient, and not yet would be. And we have 7 that we've created with Pete, and so we have about 6 to go. And then to create student-friendly rubrics reflecting the proficiency level so that the students know what the target is, and it's in the language that we use with them in class. It's not teacher language. They get it. Again, continuing to develop the enrichment and extension opportunities for students who already know and can do. And then some changes for the next year. We just had our last TSS meeting of the year with Pete, and we, at that time, aligned the 3 main writing units from the Lucy Calkins between buildings. So we're starting with this one, and then we're going to do this one, and then we're going to do this one. And the teachers agreed that they wanted to meet as many Mondays as was possible together, because right now it's like once a quarter, and we meet more than that. But it was even like every Monday that we could. We want to so that's awesome. That's really, really good. So, and I would like to echo the thanks for the support of the board for this initiative, because it is a game changer and huge impact for student learning.
We've got a question here, Megan.
Oh, okay.
And actually, it's not to pick on you, Megan, at all. This could be open, because the same question will apply going to the high school as well, but not to the same degree. But so obviously at the elementary level, there's a fantastic. I get the impression the whole building almost know every kid by the time they've gone K through 6 from a educational and almost from a psychological. The strengths and the weaknesses, and how, and then they get to junior high. And it's a bigger building, there's a lot more people, it's not the same teacher you're seeing. And so for this tremendous knowledge base that we have at the elementary level of these kids and their strengths and weaknesses and everything, and I'm not promoting any solutions, because it's a challenge, but what are we doing to transfer that knowledge base of these kids as they're going from the 6th grade to the 7th grade, from totally different environments? I guess just kind of an open question, and Dan and Pam, so I don't want to pick on you, Megan, so, and just kind of an open question of how do we transfer this tremendous knowledge base that we have of these kids, and pass that to such a big building and so many different teachers?
I would say that our buildings aren't actually that much different in size. Hanson and Southdale that are represented here are just the same or larger than our junior highs, actually. But we are going through this right now, so it's in my mind. We've had the junior high counselors come out to 6th grade and talk with our 6th graders, and we've also had visit days going to the junior high where 6th graders have been in the junior high. This year we also have had a 7th, 6th grade, and 7th grade teachers have collaborated, and we've started that process, which we haven't done in the past, and so that's been pretty meaningful. So that's just a couple things that we've done this year.
And as a parent, let me tell you that this really teaches kids to advocate for themselves. Because my daughter went and said, I don't understand this. I don't care about my grade. I just don't understand. Mm-hmm. And so they go to other teachers and they learn to advocate for themselves. It's kind of an added bonus.
And I think that's where the Tiger Time and the Power Hour has helped, because it creates openings for all staff to be available for kids. And part of their job in the collaborative team time is to look at student data, find out which kids aren't proficient, and then be able to say, this kid has these skills, let's create a time during Power Hour that they can come, or even during Tiger Time. It doesn't necessarily have to be their assigned teacher. It could be another English teacher, or math teacher, or science teacher that is agreed to work with those students. It is more difficult because we're more departmentalized at the secondary level. But I think even within departments, you can have that sense of they're all our kids. We have multiple teachers teaching 8th grade English. So why does one kid can only go to one teacher? That just doesn't make sense. Go to the teacher that you feel most comfortable with.
Don't steal all of our thunder, Dan. He's in
Okay.
slide 10 for us all.
So we did save the best for last. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
In the other caveat, what Mrs. Estep said, we actually have 3 elementaries that are as large as our junior highs right now, and a lot of people don't realize that, how quickly they are growing and how large they are. The other one is Lincoln.
So you ready, high school?
My left leg's asleep. So.
They don't have a PowerPoint, so
They're going to wing it.
We went low tech.
They went low tech.
And after the blips in the projector, we're feeling pretty good about that.
We'll just do some introductions first. I'm Josh Wilkinson.
Christy Urbanic.
And the two of us actually, so Christy and myself, we teach one of the courses, Advanced Math 4, and it's mostly a senior level class that we have. Actually, we have a representative of that class as well, sitting right here in front of you. And then Ethan teaches Algebra 2 and Algebra Fundamentals 2. And there are other classes that we teach, so those aren't the only ones that we have kind of on our schedule. But the reason that we kind of highlight those is just because that's kind of where some of these things that we're going to talk about tonight are things we tried out in these classes specifically. And we're not the only ones that have tried out certain things that we want to share with you guys tonight as well. There's other teachers at the high school, and there's other teachers in the math department that have been trying some different things out as well. So, we don't want to sit here and say that we have everything figured out or we're the only ones trying these things, but it's just kind of a small representation of some of the things that are going on at the high school, I think. So there's basically 2 big things we kind of want to get through. And mostly we're going to focus on the assessment side, because we've spent the last several years focusing a lot on the essential learnings. And so as a lot of our courses are starting to move and feel like we're comfortable in terms of what our essential learnings are, kind of the next step in that process to say, well, how do you assess how the kids are doing with those essential learnings? And how do you get the kids that maybe aren't doing so well or aren't proficient in those different areas? And how do you also get the kids that are doing well and get them to a little bit higher levels, so to enrich that? So hopefully that's kind of what this assessment piece of it is doing, at least for the classes that we have at the high school, is it's hitting both ends. So that's kind of what we're going to share. And so Christy's going to share, first of all, just in terms of what do we want out of our unit assessments and kind of how that planning goes. I'll kick in and then we'll talk about the scoring, because we use a lot of proficiency scales as well. Though this year I didn't know that's the words that I could have used for that, so I can say that now. So we could use proficiency scales. And so I'll talk about kind of how that scoring looks like, at least in Advanced Math 4 and in some of the other math classes. And then Ethan's going to talk about whatever he wants to for the conclusion of that. So I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Just for the record, I call them Josh's scales and not proficiency. So when he was talking about essential skills, we've kind of spent some time on figuring out what we want them to know. This year we spent a lot of time, and we had a lot more success this second semester in what that looks like in the end. What does that unit assessment look like? And not just making it, but what does success look like? What does proficient look like, or even highly proficient? And so with his scores, it was, what does a 5 look like? What does a 4 look like? And he'll explain the numbers. But we wanted to know what that looked like before we made it, or as we were making it. And that allowed us to kind of back up from that and make smaller checkpoints along the way. And one of the books we were reading as a math department called it an assessment roadmap. So it kind of figures out where we're going. But we know where we're going to get, but how are we going to get there? And so when we do those checkpoints, we know exactly what they need to know at this point, and then we can move forward. And so when we do the checkpoint, or quick check, or CFA, we call them quick checks, we can figure out where they're at, what every student's at, which ones need a little bit more work, need more time, do we call them in, what those scores are, then we can compare those scores, and then we can kind of move forward. And each checkpoint might get like a build, it might be a building block checkpoint, or it may be there's just 3 topics in that unit. And so one of the things to me that was kind of different was every unit is very unique. And so I couldn't, at the beginning of the year, as much as I want to, say 2 checkpoints, then a test, 2 checkpoints, then a test. That's the linear part of it, and it didn't work. There was, some units we just had 1, and then some units we had 4. So it just depends on that unit. So we had to take the time and look at it, what do we want, and then kind of back up. And then even farther back, what the assignment looks like. And so what does the practice look like? And another thing we jumped into second semester was not giving them any grades from homework. So the homework is practice, and they still, great student, great example in my class, they still look at that homework as it's getting me ready for a quick check or for the assessment. It's getting me ready, and I know if I can do this homework or assessment or assignment, whatever you want to call it, I know where I'm at. And so when they do that assignment, they know if they know it, they check their answers, they ask their questions, and they take more ownership on that, and they take more accountability for that. And so that's made a big difference, I think, at least that's what I've seen this semester. As far as the scoring goes, that stuff, we'll say at this point, has went really well, but that all came from Josh. So I'm going to let him explain those scores.
Yeah, so we happen to use, so I tried something about 5 years ago with what you called it standards-based at the time, and I never liked to label it that because as soon as you label it a certain thing, then it's almost like that's labeling me as the teacher as being a certain way. And I never wanted to label one specific method just because I felt like, okay, this method is better than what I was doing before, but I still feel like if there's something that comes along that's better, then I'll immediately switch to that. So that's kind of why we always kind of held off calling it standards-based, and instead we just said we're grading the students on a rubric. So it happened to be a 5-point scale, and so what the scores meant for us and for the students in our class was this, is that if they were at a 5, that just meant that on that particular quick check or that particular assessment, they were showing a pretty good understanding of what was going on in that one. In some of the assessments that we were giving them, that might also mean that might be just a little bit above proficient as well, so that might be more towards the mastery instead. A 4 for us is at the proficient level. So we do have a score in between those, so that's the only score we give out that's a half point, so it's a 4.5. And so typically the 4.5 was given just because it's still a very strong understanding, it's still a good understanding of what's going on for that particular objective, but maybe there's some small mistakes or some errors in their thinking, but a lot of the times the understanding wasn't that much different than a 5. And since we're still putting this into a grade book that calculates scores, and you start putting in those numbers, and you're saying proficient is 80%, and kids are asking, holy cow, I'm proficient, but you're saying I'm at a B minus. So we kind of put that in there just as a way, at least at first for the students, to transition those, that they could still get that 4.5 and translate that over into a 90%. That goes down a totally different road of saying in terms of how this fits into a gradebook system where you do have to report scores, and that's a totally different topic another time. So we'll table that for the time being. So the 4 was our proficient level that we'd say, and as long as students were scoring at a 4, 4.5, or a 5, then there was really no intervention piece to that at that time. The 3s came in, and that's where we really pushed students to move to the intervention side of things. So a 3 to us meant this, that they had some holes or gaps in their understanding that they needed to get fixed or questions answered that maybe they weren't getting, or they'd been absent and they didn't get caught up from when they were absent, whatever the reason might be. But a 3 was the place we were going to start to say that we're going to start to ask for students to come in during power hour. And at first we were going to ask, and then if we continued to ask and they continued to not come in, then it was going to become one of those things where we hand them a power hour slip and said, okay, now you're required to come in. Otherwise, we get some of our administration involved, and they force them to get in our classroom to get them the help. Myself, at least with Advanced Math 4, I had to fill a couple of those slips out at the very beginning of the semester because this was something we didn't actually change until after the winter break. And I filled out like 2 or 3 of them, and then since then I really haven't had to fill out any more because the kids have been coming in. And there's been actually very few opportunities that they've even had to come in. Like we haven't given a lot of scores of 3 because they've done a good job making sure that they understand things and getting ready for the quick checks, and then they make sure that they put that all together because we actually put a couple of objectives together when they hit that unit assessment. We do give out some scores of 2s, but typically a 2 is there's very little understanding that's there. There's very little that makes sense towards whatever the objective is. We rarely have to give out 2s, but it does happen every once in a while. And a 0 would just be, well, they didn't even take it, or they just turned in a blank piece. And if I skipped over 1 there, it's because I used to give out 1s in the scoring, but I don't really have any sort of great meaning as what a 1 is. So I give out a 1 if like a kid drew a picture on there, and then I just stopped doing that because then that didn't really mean anything. So I kind of skipped over that. So just in terms of the scores, it's really a 2, 3, 4, and a 5. And if you want to consider the 4.5 to be something different, we can. But that's kind of how we gave out those scores. And I think the biggest change that teachers have to make is when they move to that rubric scoring is you can have several questions that are there that meets one objective. It doesn't have to be one question that meets one objective. So whereas before, when you're grading these quizzes and tests, and you would give points and say, okay, I give 2 points for this problem, 3 points for this one, you total it up, and you have 30 points for this particular assessment. And really, the students are seeing the grade that's there, and they're saying, okay, I got 25 out of the 30 points, so they convert that over to percent, see that they got B on that particular assessment. They have to switch their thinking because now, if we put, say, 3 different objectives on there, they get 3 scores on there, and they're all out of 5 points. At least for Advanced Math 4, we don't actually put those scores together and give them an overall percent. With the idea being that really you take a holistic view for those particular objectives. So for objective 1 that's on the assessment, there might be 3, 4, or 5 questions, but what you have to do is when you grade that, you can't just say -1 for this, or -0.5 for this, -2 for that. You have to grade all the 4 or 5 questions that are there for the objective and almost just take a step back and say, okay, overall, how did that student show, or how did that student demonstrate their understanding of that particular objective? And so that really changes how you fundamentally grade an assessment. At first, it's way slower because you're not quite sure whether it's a 3, 4, or 5, or when to give a 4.5, or what's the difference between a 3 and a 4, because then you're talking about intervention or not having any come in for intervention. And so those conversations a lot, and this is something that Christy and I, she's shaking her head yes at this, because we had a lot of conversations early on, 3 years ago when we started this process, or 3 years ago when I made her start this process, whichever one is true, I'm not sure which. But we sat down and we actually looked at scores and we looked at students' work, and we just debated, and it was a good discussion in terms of, okay, what really does represent proficiency for that particular objective? And so that's actually a very good discussion that we have, and we've done that at times as well during those Monday mornings for our collaborative time. We've had those discussions as well during that time. So just getting the chance to analyze the data, not only before, like what Christy was saying, where we're trying to really make sure that we have this roadmap in place of assessments that gets these kids to the end goal where we want them to be. But then also after they've actually taken the assessment, taken that data, and actually going through and looking and seeing, okay, how did your students do? How did my students do? I know a lot of the other teachers have said that same thing. And it's a great opportunity to do that because it really does give you some good information about not only the students, but your teaching. But we also looked at assessments and said, holy cow, that was a terrible question. And so there's things that we could change for the next year as well. I don't know if there's anything else that
The only thing I was going to say, there was one thing I think Jill or Tara said, that being very clear on what was expected. I think I've been much better than I've ever been before because of this scoring and because of the way we plan everything out. I know that there's a clear picture of what's expected, and they know. And instead of stopping at a certain level, they try anyways, or they keep going, but they know what the expectations are, they know what it looks like, and that was another one of those that I was surprised with, I guess. Good surprise. Are you ready?
I think so. So that's an advanced math 4. To give you kind of a perspective here, when they talk about their team, they're in their team. We also have an Algebra 2 team, a Geometry team. We had a Fundamentals of Algebra team that we moved to Algebra 2 this year. So there are different teams within our math team. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that can be challenging. The good thing is, like they were talking about, is each team is kind of trying some different things and becoming more experts at it. These guys are awesome with that 1 to 5 thing, or 0 to 5 thing, no ones. And the Algebra 2 team, we were struggling, to be honest, and we didn't really know it until Jason pointed it out to me a few times, and this semester. And I thought, hey, no, we're doing pretty good, we're making some headway, and he pointed out, he goes, look at your grade books. And he kind of put a couple grade books beside each other, And he goes, how can you say you guys are on the same page when your grade books are totally different? And what he was referring to was, what were the percents of points for homework? Kids were getting points for homework compared to, like myself, when I wasn't given any points for homework, and another teacher teaching Algebra 2 was given 20% for homework. How does that affect their grade? What does that look like? He goes, your grades look totally different. One kid's experience in one class, it could be totally different than another. That was a huge eye-opener for me. And we spent a lot of time talking about what he referred to as an action research. He goes, why don't we try this? Why don't we try an action research project and see if we can get some people on the same page? And so we spent a lot of time talking with people and trying to build that trust. Let's give it a whirl, see what happens. We were doing some things. We were struggling in a lot of areas, and a lot of that was because we weren't on the same page. So we tried this out. Jason kind of led us in a parameters that we had to operate under as far as our grading. We had to go through and decide how tight we were going to make those parameters as a group, and that was the Algebra 2 and Geometry. By default, the two fundamentals of Algebra 2 teachers also teach Algebra 2, so we adopted that for fundamentals too, because if we're going to do it for one of the classes, might as well do it for the other, right, just to be consistent. So we tried that. We started the second semester with it and said, let's just see what happens. And once we had people to buy in and we got that off that plate, boy, that was a big thing for us, because now we knew what we could operate under. Now it gave a lot more significance to what our essentials were going to be. When we started building our unit assessments and started building backwards, we had some type of guidelines to work within. And that gave us some comfort and empowered us to make those decisions. So we went with our unit assessments and we built our CFAs with our learning targets along the ways. And then from there, what's the best practices to teach that? And those are great conversations. Things started to get going. It wasn't always easy. When we got that far down in the weeds, I like to say, and Christy always gives me a hard time because she thinks that's my new buzzword. But when you get that far down, it can be real tough because you've got a lot of personalities and a lot of people believe in what they do. And so it took a lot of trust building. It took a lot of swallowing a little bit of pride every once in a while. And I think one of the biggest things is we had to believe that it was better to try something than it was to be right all the time. And so sometimes we had to just concede and say, all right, I may be right in the end, but let's just try it, see how it goes. If it doesn't work, there's nothing set in stone. This is action research. We can always change it. We're going to try it and see how it goes. And we've made some mistakes, but we've made a lot of gains, way more gains than mistakes, and we feel like our work is exciting. We come in Mondays, excited to be with our teams and decide, hey, what are we going to do this week? What are we going to do this next unit? The other thing I wanted to point out, these guys, again, Josh with the scale of 0 to 5 was huge for us. We didn't know if we were going to do that. We walked in, had a couple conversations with Josh and then with Christy. Next week, hey, you want to try it? Yeah, let's try it. So we tried it. We haven't gone back. We've only implemented it more and more and more, and we found out how we're trying to take away the whole idea of it's not about the points, it's about the learning. And that scale did a great job of utilizing it. These kids are starting to figure out that the 3 or a 4 or 5 is not points in a grade book. It's where's your learning at. And they're able to gauge their own learning. And that's huge. We try to empower our kids all the time. And that's what we're trying to really accomplish is, hey, if you get a 3, you know that means something more than a 3 out of 5. It means you're not proficient. Christy came out and we were talking about CFAs, and I came in and I said, all right, guys, here we go. I sat with my team and I go, we're going to do 2 CFAs for each unit, and about 2 or 3 days in and doing this, and we went to our first unit, and I'm trying to force 2 or 3 CFAs in there, and Christy looks at me, she goes, you can't do that. She goes, you have to, like she talked about. And so she came in and kind of talked me off the cliff there a couple times because I was like, I need something linear here, and she talked me off the cliff. So that was another great thing from their group that came out. Back to, so what has it done for us? We talk about all the time in my class. In fact, I got posters up there that says it's not about being done, it's about being ready. Okay? So we tell kids, I don't care if you do 100 problems like this. If you need to do 3 and you feel like you're ready, you feel like you're going to be successful in the next coming CFA, then that's what you need to do. You need to gauge your learning and make yourself successful there. And those kids know that. And that changes the whole conversation in our classroom. I think as teachers, we would run around checking for completion or whether someone cheated on their homework. Did they do it? Did their mom do it? Did their friend do that? That was a hard thing for us. And then once we let that go, it just changed the conversation with all the kids, and the kids started to feel that, and what they look forward and doing every day has changed. The 1 to 5 thing that they were talking about, this is how it's changed, and it's exciting. So I'm going to give you some student examples. We talked about 1 to 5, and they said if it's a 3, it's not proficient, and we're going to do something about it, especially if it's an essential. We're ready to move heaven and earth to make sure you understand it, because we've said that's essential. Okay? Just the other day, just this last 2 weeks, in my fundamentals class, which you have to understand, that's the lowest level math class we have in the high school, fundamentals 2. I had 3 kids come in after taking a CFA the day before. This was before the class, this 5th hour class. They came in during power hour, which is right before 5th hour. Walked in and said, "Hey, Mr. Weekman," and it was like bing, bing, bing in a row. I was sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome." And they said, "Hey, I saw on Infinite Campus that I got a 3 on this essential concept. Can I come in and start ahead of time? Can I fill out my power hour slip and write that, hand that to you, and can I get going on that before class starts?" "Absolutely," I said. And it was just one after another. I had the same thing happen with my Algebra 2 kids. They're starting to look, and they're starting to gauge their own learning. Not only gauge it, they feel empowered to do something about it, and they're coming in to do it. And I think that's exactly where we need to go with the information technology, where you can Google a lot of stuff, and instead of us just vomiting information to them all the time, sorry, is that the best word I can use? It's more about how do we teach students to learn? And so, because they have all the information at their fingertips, but how do they learn from it? And that's a lot of the big point. Another thing is the fundamentals class, when we came in at semester and said, we're not going to do homework. And that was hard for a lot of people, especially teachers that teach the lowest level courses, because they believe that without the points, the kids aren't going to do it. They've got no motivation to. And I didn't believe in that. Some of us didn't believe in that, but we never really tried it with our lowest level. I still held back too. I still was like, all right, I'll do the points. And we said, we're going to do it. So we came in, and I remember walking to my fundamentals class, and I said, okay, guys, new semester, new rule. You're getting no points for homework. And the kids kind of looked at each other and like, did you just say that? And half the kids go, "Woo, I'm not doing any more homework. I've never got to do it. I'm not going to do it. This is awesome. I just got to do assessments." Yeah. And they're all like high-fiving each other and thought it was great. And then there was a couple students go, "But if we don't do our homework," because we already had some of the CFA process in, they already knew what the 3 meant. A couple goes, "Well, if we don't do our homework, how are we going to know what we need to do for the CFA?" I said, "Well, that's a good question." Right? That's a really good question. And some of them are like, I'm still doing my homework. That's it, that intervention, I'm still doing it. Some other kids are like, I'm not doing it. We handed out a practice set. They were like worksheets. We handed out a practice set, and I said, "Hey, you guys are going to go work on this today." And I'm not kidding you. One of the students that was in there, it's kind of sad, but true. One of the students was over there with another student. And they were working together, and I saw him looking over, and he was copying. It was a practice set. He was copying every answer the guy next to him was doing. And I sat and watched for a little bit. And I went over, this was one of my more challenged students, and I went over and I touched him on the shoulder. I said, "Young man, you know that's not worth any points." "Yeah, whatever, Mr. Weekman, I got to get it done." I said, "You can get it done, but you have to see it. You know there's a CFA. You have to know this stuff." Yeah. I mean, no matter what I said to him, he was so ingrained. He had so been trained that his job was to get that done, just to get it done and get me off his back. And it was so evident. And I just sat back. I said, okay. I let him go through it because I knew this kid was going to have to see this process go through. And sure enough, he got every one of them in. He went up and checked his answers that Tommy did for him, and they were all right. Got to a CFA, didn't do so well. Well, that's when we started kicking intervention. "Hey, I saw you didn't do so well. Let's talk about how we could better use our time this time. Because our expectation is that you get 4s and 5s and understand that." That was a huge learning curve for that young man. We're still working with him. He's still stuck in that just, what do I got to do to pass? How do I just turn this in? And that's not what we're okay with. I mean, you could have an A and still be an intervention because you're not getting an essential concept. And that's a hard thing for someone to understand, but that's what we stand by. The other thing with that fundamentals class, we have a group of 4. I put them in groups. These guys now, when it's time to work on those practice sets, it's awesome to watch. I just sit back and watch. I put the answers on the front, and those guys will sit there, and when I say guys, that's girls and guys, men and women. They'll start working, and it's fun to listen to them talk now, because they know the expectation is that they got to learn it. not just copy the answers, because all the answers are out there. Hey, go ahead, you can copy them, but they know better now. And they'll start working and hey, Joe, I know you got this. Can you come help me? And before I know it, the whole class is moving around. They're helping each other out, and because they know a CFA is coming out. And they're working together. And not only are they working together, we have enrichment opportunities for these fundamentals kids, that because we have some kids that are goers and doers, and we want to take them to that next deeper, not wider. I think I heard Tara say. They want to keep going, and then we have kids that are real strugglers. And so we have these opportunities for kids to go in, and again, there's no points for it. They don't get anything extra for it, but they go up and they start taking the challenge of doing these things, and they're doing that on a regular basis. This is, like I said, our lowest level kid. After 2 units, we had I did kind of a town hall after going through this process with Algebra 2, and I asked the students, I said, which one do you like? Do you like the new way better? It was overwhelmingly yes. And I said, well, why then? Kids raised their hand. One kid in the corner said, because I feel like you're assessing more of what I know and not what I do. Direct quote. So I said, that's a good one. We went over to another young lady. She was sitting over in this corner, and she said, you know, in the old time, you used to give us those worksheets, and a lot of us wouldn't even do them. We'd just wait till you come to class and tell us how to do it, and then we'd hand it in to get the points for you doing the work. So I'm sitting as a teacher, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's true. Now they go, that's a practice that we know we're going to be held accountable with the CFA. I had one of my toughest kids just to get on board, and I walked by and he raised his hand right in my face, and I was like, whoa, he usually doesn't share a whole lot, but he did. Miss Weekman helps me keep on track. Which I was like, oh, he gets it. You know, 2 weeks later I had to put him in a small study hall, but he was at least starting to get it. Biggest impacts coming out of Mondays. And the biggest thing is we're a stronger team. There is no doubt about it. People talk about our kids. I go in to first hour and I'm heading down the hallway, and I'm going down the math hallway, and I pass about 4 doors, and almost every time someone walks out and says, hands me a folder. Hey, this folder, inside there's a CFA for Tommy and Johnny. They didn't do so well on these topics. Can you cover that topic in small study hall? They're coming to small study hall today. Okay, I take that folder, I walk up, I go sit down, here comes Tommy and Johnny. Tommy and Johnny sit down. Hey Tommy, Mrs. Zimmerman says you need to work on this. Johnny, you need to work on this topic from the CFA. Here's the practice sets for you. Let's get working on that. So we'll start working on that. Tommy may get it right away. Hey, I see you just missed a little bit from your CFA, Tommy. I think you got that. Let's take that CFA. So Tommy will take the CFA. He's got it. Johnny, you got a little bit more work. Why don't you come into Mrs. Zimmerman for Power Hour? I'll hand this folder back to you. It'll be ready for you. You can knock these things out. Go into Mrs. Zimmerman. She'll get you through. Take that CFA. We'll be good to go. I'll walk back down after class. Hey, here's what happened with Tommy and Johnny. Here's the Power Hour. They're going to come in for Power Hour. Then I'll come back next morning, walk by. Hey, Tommy didn't show up for Power Hour, so I'm going to have him in small study hall. Okay, so they were Tommy. Why don't you come to small Power Hour? I had better things to do. Well, that's probably not a good choice. What can we do to make better decisions so we don't have to do this again? That's the type of stuff now when we talk about our team, our kids. We're doing on a regular basis. And some people look at it, God, that's got to be chaotic. It is. It's controlled chaos is what I like to say. And kids are really improving from it. Last thing I think, and this is the biggest thing, I think we're teaching students how to learn. And not only teaching them how to learn, but how to gauge their learning. And not only teach them how to gauge their learning, but how to do something about that. And we have a framework to do that because of our Mondays and because of our interventions that we put in the high school. And we're excited about
that. How long does the CFA take? Like, is it at the beginning of class 5 minutes, or, I mean, just...
It all depends. We've had some that are the last 15 minutes because they're practicing up until then. Or I've had a lot this semester where I say, you tell me when you're ready. So they're working on their practice, and they work on it until they're ready for it, and then I hand it to them. So it's not an all-encompassing.
That's in class, though?
Yes.
Right, so you're working in class, and so when you're ready, they raise your hand and you hand it to them. Gotcha.
Same. Yeah, pretty much. Usually we try and keep it about 15 minutes. Sometimes they get a little bit longer than that, but it just depends on the objective. But for the most part, we do try and keep them quicker.
You start using them?
I've
start using them?
Okay.
I've said this many times, we have the best staff in the world, and I wouldn't change them for anything. So great job. You can see the passion as it shines through. So thank you for all that you do. It's unbelievable the work that you're doing. And before you leave, because again, there's no need to stay for the rest of the meeting, but there's a couple things that I wanted to just clarify that was said earlier, and it's a good time to do this with the staff here. March 22nd, the headline in the Courier was enrollment growth funding driving school tax increase. So that was something that was publicized, just so everybody knows that. We knew that tax increase and had about an hour and a half board meeting around that on March 21st. So that was something that we knew was there. And the second item is we have not spent our budget and overspent our budget. There's a max authorized budget, and when you're growing in enrollment, you're always a year behind in that dollar amount. So you have to catch up. And so we weren't caught up. You have to wait till the next year to get that funding. So you spend your money that year before so you can get the funding the following year and you buy down your cash reserve. So that's what we did. We didn't overspend our budget, just so everybody's aware. So I wanted to clarify that when you were here. Thank you.
And before you leave, I want to thank you all, the 3 administrators and the 12 teachers. And you know, it's not just about the learning, it's about the teaching. You've shown us the example. And for Ethan's sake, I would call it maybe a 4.5 presentation tonight. So keep going.
Do I have to make a motion for it?
It was a little long. It was a little long.
I think it was the vomit comment.
I think it was big regurgitation.
So thank you. Thank you. Great job. Great job. Thank you. Have a good night. Hopefully it's dry out there. Great job. Great job.
Okay. Those are always the things we look forward to, is the presentations from our different curricular areas. And tonight we've spent 5 years on our PLCs, and we've learned each year, and they're learning each year more. And I know that time we give every week is paying off to our students. Next on our agenda is the approval for the student fees for 16 and 17.
Okay, I guess I'll tackle that one. You should have in your packet a proposed fee schedule for the 2016-17 school year. There are only really 2 changes that we're asking the board for. We're asking for a $1 per month increase in the transportation fee, and that fee is for students that live inside. If you're elementary, you live inside the 1 mile circle, junior high 2 miles, high school 3 miles. And you can see, otherwise there are no changes. We're not even asking for a change in the one-way fee, it's just a round trip fee. And then the other change we're asking for is a 10-cent increase in breakfast and lunch for the food service program. And what is driving that is the USDA requires school districts to charge their full-price students the equivalent of what the addition of the federal reimbursement for full price plus what a student would pay for the full price has to equal what we receive for reimbursement for a free meal. Okay? And we're not there yet. We're not alone in that. There's a lot of school districts across Iowa and across the nation that are not there yet. The USDA has developed a formula that we're supposed to use, and we're following the formula and asking for the bare minimum increase as determined by the formula, which is 10 cents.
Historically, you can see kind of where those have been the last 5 years, and again, we're trying to hold things as steady as possible so we have the least impact on families and students.
Do I hear a motion to approve the recommended student fees for 2016 and 17?
So moved.
Moved by Joyce and second by Susan. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And then we've got the technology.
Okay, that would be me again. We're getting ready to order the next round of end-user devices for our students in the district, and you'll see in your packet is a the specifications for the Chromebooks for next year. They're very little change from the last year. Slightly improved CPU, Celeron processor, a couple other minor things, but basically they're the same device that we ordered a year ago, just the next model up. We've asked major suppliers to quote the devices for us, and the IT team would like to recommend purchasing 840 Samsung Chromebook 3s. Those have been the Chromebooks that we've been using. We've had very, very good luck with those. They were a batch 1 and batch 3, I believe. And then they also would like to try the Dell unit. We understand a number of school districts are moving to the Dell Chromebook. Some school districts that our IT team works with pretty closely, and they collaborate a lot. And so we'd like to purchase 50 Chromebooks sort of as a trial to see how well they would work. So you can see that the total is for 890 Chromebooks, as well as the operating system for those. And the low quote from those listed on the summary sheet is from CDWG out of Vernon Hills, Illinois, at $207,697.50. And funds for this come out of the physical plant and equipment levy, and of course those are dedicated dollars for the district technology plan.
How will you determine who gets the 50 test ones? How will you determine who gets the 50?
I think Dan might be able to answer that a little bit, but we've got some students that, how can I say it, tend to be a little rougher on some of the machines than others, and so with those, most likely would be the students that may get to drive the Dells first.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
No one
That makes sense.
had a history of
That makes sense.
being charged for some repairs.
That makes sense.
Any other questions from Doug?
So Doug, so Herbs on, is that how you pronounce it, Herbs?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so they're offering, so in their offer, it was only the Chromebooks, but they didn't provide any operating system?
That's because they don't have the site license from, the Chromebooks run on Android. No, they were on the Chrome operating system, and they don't have authority to sell the Chrome operating system. They can sell the device, but they can't sell the operating system. That's why you'll notice, even with Dell, you'll notice that Dell can only offer, obviously they can't sell Chromebooks, because we asked for a price from Dell.
Right.
And we have a relationship with Dell. There are other devices that we've bought in the district in the past from them. We cannot buy it through Samsung Direct. We have tried. They run through a dealer now. And like I said, the Samsungs have been pretty darn reliable. Even some of the year one machines, I think what did Shane and Brian told us that
it's like 3%.
Yeah, the breakage rate is like 3%. It's a very low number. It's just they've really held up pretty well. They've held up pretty well, surprisingly well.
Are the unit prices on these going down, or is it just kind of like...
They're running about the same. They're running at about that
260,
270 range, 280 range.
But you get a little more power every year for the same price?
You get a little more juice.
Yeah.
And they're beefing the corners up a little bit. I think the manufacturers are starting to figure out some of the things they need to do to help improve the durability of the units. And it just... Dan and Pam can probably speak to it better than I can, but it seems like the Samsungs have really held up pretty well.
Some of it's just a little bit of action research. You don't know when you buy something how. I mean, that's when we went to the Acers, and they were touted as being much tougher than the Samsungs originally, and that proved to be totally the opposite.
And I can tell you that the customer service that we get from the dealers that we have to buy parts from Samsung, it's just not a problem. We can do warranty work. Our people can do all of it, and they literally can tear them apart and put them back together in their sleep, I think. We expect the same thing from Dell. We've been told that they're very easy to work with. Other things that we've bought from them in the past, they've been very easy to work with, very user-friendly or customer-friendly, and we would anticipate that to be the same with this. And we'll like to give them a ride and see where the pony goes.
We get about 4 years out of these, or 3 years?
The intent is 3.
3. Yep.
And so it's this year 7th graders and 10th graders. And then they get, every year the 7th graders and 10th graders get new devices, and they're supposed to last 3 years.
And that's why the 52. We want to add the 50 in right now because we don't want to buy 840 Chromebooks that might not be up to the standards that we want. We learned that lesson a few years ago, and I think the Acers have a breakage rate of about 8.5 to 8.9, someplace through there. And we certainly want to see if these are durable the way that we expect them to be, and put them in the hands of some students to test them out.
Okay, do I hear a motion to that effect?
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District approve the low quote of $207,697.50 from CDWG, Vernon Hills, Illinois, for 890 Chromebooks with operating system, software, excuse me.
Your second? Second. Second, Susie, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item would be the architectural contract. Mr. Nefsker, would you?
Well, I'll start off with it. In your packet are the contracts for architectural services for North Cedar, Orchard Hill, and the new elementary school. And to kind of go through some of it a little bit, the fee that the architect would charge includes all the engineering costs associated with that. It'll be the electrical engineer, the heating and ventilating and air conditioning engineer, the structural engineer, the civil engineer. They bring a sound person in when they look in the larger rooms, the music rooms, the gymnasium, cafeteria, that sort of thing. There are going to be a few costs that are outside of that. That's primarily reproduction costs, the cost to print the books that the contractors would use to bid on the project, the print the plans. There's no testing involved with that, so we will be paying for the cost of material testing, primarily concrete, asphalt, if we use asphalt, aggregate material, that sort of thing, to make sure that when the concrete's poured, it's poured appropriately, and it's got the right slump and all the things associated with that. There are a couple of the studies that the city will be requiring of us, a traffic study which has been completed, and environmental impact study, and we're in the process of having that done as well, and those fees would be outside of that. So that kind of gives you a general layout of how it all works. The design team obviously works with the administration, and then we'll go through a series of 3 meetings with teaching staff, and so that to make sure that we have commonality amongst all the classrooms in an elementary building, but yet at the same time hearing what that staff wants to see in their classroom. And then, it's like I said, it's a three meeting process where at the end of the 3rd meeting, then pretty much know this is the type of millwork that's going to be in the classroom, what the instructors want, where the marker board's going to go, where's this going to go, where's that going to go, as an example. And so it's a very detailed, intact process, and then they'll go through final drawings. And of course, the design team's with us through the whole step of the way. Once the project's let, they're involved with us, so we'll have monthly meetings at least with them throughout the entire project, and with anything that comes up along the way.
These contracts are between us and Structure. They are the local architect for the design team, so they're directly with them. It's a standard A1A with changes. This has been reviewed by our school attorney down in Des Moines, Allers and Cooney, and she certainly has said that she is extremely comfortable with the terms and the scope size of the work underneath these contracts. Anytime we have something this large, we want to make sure we have our attorney review it to make sure that everything is according to law, according to scope, and certainly within that framework that we expect.
So a question on the design process. I mean, I think it's very important that you get adequate input from users. As a user, there's many, many things that I want. Many things that I want. And sometimes my budget doesn't always permit that. So how do we separate the nice from nice to have from these are essentials, and that can, the criteria for defining what goes in those two buckets will depend on who you are asking.
Well, to start off with that, the district has had a classroom standard for quite a number of years now. That started all the way back with Cedar Heights, when Cedar Heights was first done. And so that standard is still in effect today as to millwork as an example, marker boards, technology in the classroom. So if, I'm just going to give you an example. If one teacher wants an 84-inch flat screen, no, that's not our standard. Okay, this is our standard over here. That would be an example. Restrooms, a lot of the other common areas, gymnasiums, cafeterias, all that, we have a standard for that, and we've been following that standard. There's been one change in the gym standard since Cedar Heights was built. Cedar Heights has got a sports court gym floor. All the other elementaries since then have gone wood. And so that's the standard. And so there are unique things that will come up. I won't say that that's not the case, and we look at those and we balance those, but the idea is you'll be able to walk into in a classroom in Cedar Heights, Lincoln, Southdale, Hanson, and they're going to fundamentally function and look about the same.
And for clarity, this we're not letting this isn't the architectural contract for the new elementary?
Yes,
it
there's
is
all three of
them.
Okay. You would be approving all three contracts tonight.
Okay. So but the conceptual designs that we created for the new elementary look somewhat different than maybe some of our existing buildings as far as a modular design. How does that interact with our standards? Because that's a much more expensive exterior to build than maybe like a Lincoln, which I assume followed our standard.
A little bit of that was built into the budget. I know there'll be some debates that'll come here over the next few months about movable partition walls and some things like that. But some of that was already calced into the cost per square foot. So,
but does that modular design follow the same standard as a Lincoln?
Yeah, but as far as how if you take just a regular classroom, the standard will still be the same.
So the standards really apply more to the classrooms as far as millwork and finishes and stuff like that. I mean, where I see as far as that conceptual design is that's a more expensive to do in a modular format like that is a much more expensive way to build and maintain over the long term. And so that's just that's a concern that I have about, is that being driven by our user group, or is that driven by some other external, our architects or fielding there driving us that way?
Well, you guys answer that one.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you want to take a shot at this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, last year we had representatives from each of the grade levels, from each of the buildings, and we tried to balance that out, and then administrators. And the fielding in there actually took a lot of that input when they were doing the conceptual drawing.
So, I think I understand your question, and when we think modular, we're thinking some of the flexible designs and flexible classrooms, and that's been done in Cedar Heights, Lincoln, Hanson. It will be done at Orchard Hill, as well as North Cedar when those are completed, and certainly in the new elementary. So that is kind of the model. It's the collaborative spaces, the maker spaces, the hands-on learning spaces we know we have to have, just as the discussion tonight with our PLCs and breaking kids into smaller groups. So that's really is kind of the standard right now that we go with.
But I don't see our other buildings having such an extent of modularity, if you will. And I'm all for the collaborative spaces and that kind of thing. I'm talking more about the external shell of the building.
Make it more linear is what you're saying.
Is a more linear design than that conceptual design because it will, we're paying extra for that.
Well, I'm not trying to argue one way or the other with that. I do know that the concept design sure knocked down the amount of hallways we had to work with, and always cost the same per square foot as the classroom does.
And that's one.
That's one of the things that I noticed about it from my end of looking at this sphere, is that I look at Hanson and Southdale and some of our other buildings where you can take a skateboard and take you half an hour to get from one end to the other for an old man like me. But you don't have that hallway length as much. It's more built into the collaborative space, so they're much more efficient with the square footage. At least it appears to be, from what I can tell.
It's much more efficient, and I know that's something we talked about in a few years ago when we went through the public forums, that an average elementary has about 15% hallway space. That's really not usable space education-wise and for the learning. The concept design, again, that's what it is. That schematic, really high concept design is, now it's getting cold in here, really, and again, I have to go back and look, but it was about 3.5–4% of space that is just unusable walkway, hallway spaces. The rest of it's all integrated into the classroom, the collaborative spaces, the learning spaces, and that's really that new design to make sure that we are efficient and effective. So I think some of those spaces that you might have seen in the concept drawing, that could be bump out spaces that we should go and probably make some more smooth. We're there to help with that efficiency and flow within those areas to make them best suited for learning.
Yeah. Your comments have not fallen on deaf ears. We've already relayed to the team that we need to take a look at some of this and see what we can do about smoothing some of this out.
We just don't want Velveeta box.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of things that you can do that you can take a Velveeta box, but you can enhance it, and there's a lot of things you can do so it doesn't end up looking like a box. But if you keep your main external shell as linear as possible, it reduces both the construction costs and the long-term maintenance costs.
And I've had a couple of conversations with the design team, and your concern's been relayed.
Yeah, and and my concern is too, just from and I appreciate that Fielding Nair took all the input and stuff like that, but Fielding Nair in the end didn't have to pay for it either. My challenge to Fielding Nair, if they were sitting here, is great, you just achieve that result, but you have to do it within a much more linear design, and perhaps that's what the challenge that you've already given them. So,
and here's the interesting aspect. We put this on our frequently asked question for the bond. I think Lincoln Elementary estimated to build now would be about $20.9 million. The new elementary, same number of students that it will serve is about 19.8. So when you talk about efficiency, Lincoln would be more expensive to build right now because even though it's two-story, but because of some of those spaces that really are unusable hallway spaces that aren't built into the overall efficiency of the building. So, when you talk cost, sometimes when you look at a current building that we have, replicate that building would be much more expensive than what we have even with the schematic of a new elementary.
And it was $9.6 million when it was built.
Exactly. Yeah.
So your heights was 6.9. And we built that around an old shell. And it's not ideal.
Yeah.
We're making it work. Limited space. I think this, and I'm not a designer, but is this not also designed so that we can add a fourth section reasonably well to this?
When the new building the final design is out, we'll have it laid out in such a way that we'll be able to add on additional classrooms. It'll be pre-planned, so to speak, so that if 10 years down the road or whenever that day comes, that space will be dedicated for that. And a classic example would be like a Southdale, as we knew we were going to be improving classrooms, we would make sure that we ran our geothermal lines appropriately or powered to that area appropriately so that when we got to that point to do that work, we didn't have to tear everything back up to get to it. And so we'll be doing some things the same way to plan for that.
And eventually, we'll have to have a discussion at the board table. Part of that design with, again, the modulars with some of the bump outs was for future classroom, because you want an additional first grade classroom and first grade pod and just not add on to the end of the building. That'd be easier, but it's not going to be conducive to education. The question would be, I think we're going to have to answer around the board table, do we do an alternative bid to have 4 sections and see what that looks like for cost, if it makes it more linear and more efficient versus a 3-section building. So eventually we're going to have to look at that if our enrollment growth explodes the way it is going in that area of town, especially with some of the projections that are out there. But again, I think a 3-section building, as we currently have those high-level schematics, that would look different. That was just for purpose of planning and to get some numbers out to our community, because we heard that through the first bond election. We want firm numbers. Now we'll go through and continue to refine them.
Can we get, some kind of an evaluation, a high-level evaluation, just kind of on what that trade-off would be? Because it doesn't make me, I cringe a bit at thinking of adding all these individual modules all over the building, and whether that's, whenever that occurs, that's individual little construction projects going on all over the place, and the cost that's associated with that. I mean, if you take today's assumptions, we may be better off just saying, hey, we're going to do a much more linear design, so we don't have to do so much modular, and doing 4 sections, and versus doing the 3 sections and trying to add individual classrooms later. So,
and that's a discussion we're going to have to be able to look at those return on investments long term, because I think that's going to be important. What is going to be the cost 5 years from now when we know we'll have to put those in, versus what happens if we do it from day one, and if we can cut costs, still make it a building that's something to be proud of for our students, that is educationally advanced and suitable, but also make sure it's efficient in design. So I think that's going to be the challenge that, number one, we're going to have with our design teams. Number two, that we're going to have a discussion as a board to find out, do we want to do that as an alternative with a potential for 4 sections starting day one.
At what point do you think we need to do that? Because you don't want to get too far down the road with teacher groups and facilities committee.
Contracts in place first.
As far as whether we wanted to bid the new building with a 4-section versus a 3-section, we could do that all the way through the bidding stage. And yes, do we have to pay a little bit extra for the architects to draw the drawings for that? Yes. But then we'll know base bid for a 3-section building is X, add this to make it a 4-section building. And we've actually had one high-level conversation about that. So that if that's a direction that the board wants to go or would like to entertain that, we certainly can do that.
My hypothesis is that the incremental cost will be will be small to make it 4-section with a more linear design. It's a different concept, so it's more linear design versus trying to do a 3-section, more modular, and then adding a 4th module in there to make it 4-section. Again, hypothesis ready to be proven or rejected, but it does create 2 different paths as far as design paths, because those are anyway. I guess.
Jeff, I guess I want to say that I do have faith in our architects that we've had on both of the projects, even on our junior highs and at the elementary buildings. And I hear what you're saying, but I think we have to believe in the process and know that it's going to come back to us. I hear what I think we all hear what you're saying, but we need to move forward with some of the steps first to get to that point that you want. I know you don't want it to go down the road too far before we have it come to us, but we need to get down the road a little bit farther, and we've all had that conversation, whether it needs to be 3 or 4 sections. So I think we're all thinking that, but we have to have faith in the architects that they'll guide us through that too, along with the planning process.
Yeah, well, and
Like I
that's,
said, seeing this conversation is part of that process.
Yeah.
We all want efficiency.
And I think it's important that we're not sacrificing anything educationally. I mean,
Yes.
if we just build a cells and bells building for the sake of being efficient, I mean, we want to be financially responsible, but we cannot also miss an opportunity to provide our students with a modern building that is going to meet their learning needs into the future, not the same thing that we built in 1950.
Do I hear a motion that we approve these architecture contracts?
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District approve the architectural services contracts for North Cedar Elementary, Orchard Hill Elementary, and the new elementary school with Structures Architects, Waterloo, Iowa, as presented.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And
Thank you very much.
Adrian, would you lead us through the CFEA contract, or CFESP contract?
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Karen. The materials that were distributed in your packet, I want to replace the recommendation for the CFESP. I realized before the meeting tonight that the copy I had given to Carrie DeBeau for your packet was my last but one draft. So this is the correct version. And when you put it in front of you, I'll point out the very significant inclusion in this piece of paper, which was not in the one that is in front of you on the screen.
Thank you.
This is a proposed agreement with the Cedar Falls Educational Support Professionals, and just to remind you, that's the group that represents our para-educators, both general and special education para-educators, library media para-educators, and the building secretaries. Tentative agreement on a contract to cover a one-year period, July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2017, was reached at mediation on April 26, 2016. This follows a two-year agreement for 2014-2016, which expires on the 30th of June 2016. This tentative agreement has been ratified by CFESP members. Economic items, a 45-cent an hour increase for current employees in all classifications. And current employees in the classification Para-Educator 1 Special Education will receive an additional increase of 10 cents an hour. That means the special education para-educators will actually be going up by 55 cents and everyone else will go up by 45 cents. Second bullet, starting base wages for newer employees will increase by 23 cents an hour, with Para-Educator 1 Special Education increasing by 28 cents an hour. The third bullet is the item that is the correction. Employee contributions to insurance premiums for single coverage to increase from $1 per month to $5 per month. So the recommendation is that the total package settlement for the agreement is 4.64%, and we recommend that the board ratify this tentative agreement.
And I would remind the board that that 4.64% is the total package, which includes the cost of FICA, IPERS, health insurance, life insurance, long-term disability insurance, dental insurance, and vision insurance. I think I got it.
That is correct, yes, and that's exactly what I was going to say, so thank you.
I hear a motion we approve this contract.
So moved.
Got a motion by Joyce, second by?
Second.
By Susan or Susie. Any questions?
Yes. So, if the single coverage goes from $1 a month to $5 a month, does that automatically affect family coverage, or does that stay the same?
They're not eligible for family.
Okay.
We bargained a change several years ago so that employees hired after a certain date only have single coverage.
Okay.
Unless they're grandfathered in, they're not eligible.
Gotcha. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving this contract, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Adrian, the next one would be the Teamster contract for 2016-17.
Thank you. A proposed agreement with Teamsters Local 138. Tentative agreement was reached on April 14, 2016 on a contract to cover a one-year period, July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2017 on economic items. The second year of the 2016 aiding agreement on language items will take effect on July 1st, 2017. This tentative agreement has been ratified by Teamsters members. In other words, we've agreed to a 2-year agreement on language, which means next spring we will not negotiate language, but we will negotiate next spring, once again, wages and insurance. So we have a 2-year agreement proposed on language, just a 1-year agreement on economic items. Economic items, employee paid monthly health insurance single premium to increase from $5 to $10 per month. An increase in the hourly wage rate for current employees in all classifications by 65 cents an hour, with an increased wage rate for employees in classifications 6 and 7 by an additional 25 cents an hour. I remind the board that we've talked previously about the fact that our skilled trades rates in this bargaining group were not keeping pace with market, and so Teamsters agreed with us that the skilled trades rates, which are classifications 6 and 7, should increase by that additional 25 cents over and above the 65 cents that everyone will receive. The third bullet, increasing starting base rates for new employees in classifications 1 through 5A by 62 cents an hour, and 85 cents an hour increase in classifications 6 and 7. And the one language item is to change personal leave to now allow carryover of up to 8 hours with a maximum accrual of 32 hours, and allow personal leave to be taken to extend a vacation or a holiday subject to supervisory approval. Currently, there's a prohibition on extending a holiday or vacation in that fashion, and Mr. Gersimer said that he felt making that change and providing some additional flexibility for the staff was something that would be a benefit to them and something that he could certainly work with as he schedules the work that needs to be performed.
And Adrian, what did you say on the up to how many hours of carryover?
They can accrue 32 hours.
Before that, it's 8 or 16.
So they can carry over 16.
Okay.
So basically, you get think of it as 2 days a year.
Okay.
And in the second year, you get 2 more days. Where currently, you can only roll over 1 day or 8 hours.
Okay.
They would now be able to roll over 16 hours.
Okay. Thanks.
So the total package increase is 4.65%, and we recommend ratification of this tentative agreement.
Do I hear a motion to approve the recommendation for the Teamster contract?
So moved.
Doug, motion, and a second by
Second.
Susan. All in favor, say aye.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So does this have the same, the same
Yes.
inclusion as you said
All
before?
total packages that you'll see from my office will include all insurance costs, all benefit costs.
So that nice long list of all those benefits
got
that you
it.
rattled off, those are all included in this.
I can't speak for how our other public sector partners do it, but I know how we do it. Ours has to be total package, and that's through PERB. When we negotiate in good faith, it includes all those aspects within that total package. So it's just not a base salary increase, it's everything added together for that final number.
Doug, you had a question?
No.
Any question?
I was moving to.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, my quick question is kind of on following up, Jeff. So we don't know from other districts if that's a similar.
I didn't say districts, I
Okay.
said other public employers. City, county. City,
Okay,
county,
so-
state government.
Do you,
public-
is it similar for other districts? Everyone
All,
kind of follows?
typically all districts in the state will do TPI, total package increase.
And they offer the same kinds of, dental, vision, all.
Some
Or
do, some
some
don't. I mean, it's all
Just
how
curious.
it's all works out with those individual districts. You know, districts that I've been in don't, the district I came from didn't offer dental and vision. It wasn't even an option. But you know, every district's a little different. But they all package, cost a total package. Most districts are in some sort of a pool across the state, so you know typically what they offer, depending on what pool they're involved. And again, it's pretty standard across the state what those look like. It might vary a little bit from dental and the cost of dental versus some of the deductibles in a health insurance plan, but they're usually within the same framework.
Would that be similar to kind of what people pay for their monthly contribution to the insurance premiums? I'm just curious. I mean, we've talked about that before.
We have different levels of different insurance plans, so it depends on which plan you select on your overall costs that you have to pay into it. So it depends on which plan you're on.
But that would be kind of similar across the state as well, you think, or not?
When you're comparing public school districts, yes.
Similar.
That seems to be one area where the employee groups really want to hang on to that low amount that they pay in versus maybe private sector. That just seems to be, something that they really value.
In a previous district, we had actually an agreement through mediation where the overall salary was lowered from one year to the next year because of the total package concept. They wanted to keep that insurance the same. So, and again, the insurance was actually a little better than the insurance package that we offer here. So it's always included in that total package concept. It depends on what people want within that good faith bargaining practice that you go through to ensure that here is the total package number. Where do you want that money and dollar amount allocated towards?
So, and I know this is not a good example, Adrian, I'm sorry, because these names don't apply necessarily to this contract, but if you will hear me with the question. For example, these numbers that we're approving here, is that the total
No,
TPI?
that's just salary.
That's only salary?
That's just salary.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the teacher contract as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Adrian, CFEA contract.
Proposed agreement with the Cedar Falls Education Association. A tentative agreement has been reached on a contract to cover a one-year period, July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2017 on economic items. The second year of the 2016-2018 agreement on language items will take effect on July 1st, 2017 and expire on June 30th, 2018. So in other words, as was the case for the Teamsters contract, next year we will only bargain wages and insurance with the teachers as the language items will be in effect for 2 years, not one, as has been the case for many years in this district. This agreement follows an agreement for the period July 1st, 2014 through June 30th, 2016. This tentative agreement has been ratified by CFEA members. So, economics, $950 addition to the 2015-16 base salary, step advancement, add student senate, DECA, assistant dance and junior high robotics positions to the supplemental salary schedule, and increase the head dance position from 5% to 6%. And the district will pay the increase in individual health insurance premiums. So the recommendation is the total package settlement of 4.71. We recommend ratification of this tentative agreement.
Again, total package, even though supplemental salary schedules of student senate, DECA, assistant dance, robotics, add to the overall total package, because that's a cost by the district, which increases the total package cost. So again, it's negotiating in good faith how those dollars are allocated within that total package.
So within that whole package of the increasing by 4.71, there's additional monies then that are channeled to.
That additional monies was 1/100th of 1%.
Yeah.
Were those positions not paid positions before, or?
They weren't negotiated into the contract before, no.
So said differently, Jeff, we could have started a 4.71 settlement, but the amount on the base would have been greater than 950 had none of those changes or additions been made to the supplemental schedule.
Yep. And the 950 is equal across all staff?
No. You go ahead.
No, so you build the salary schedule.
I built as well. This is, we're very typical compared to every other public school district in the state. There's a salary schedule, so it's lane and step. And so for every year that you work in the school district, I say you advance down the lane. So step here, down, down, down. And then as you have more graduate credit hours, you start advancing horizontally. And everybody gets to advance every year, unless we bargained that they wouldn't. But that's how, so you're going to have some people that will receive more than 950. But you'll have some people, especially those that are more senior, that may receive less than that, depending upon how the salary schedule works and how the percentages are within the individual steps in the salary schedule.
So 950 is an average.
It's a base increase is a better way to describe it, because it drives, not only does it drive the salary increase, it also drives what the extracurricular salaries are, because that's a percentage off of that number. That number drives basically everything. So it's like the clutch, and another way of looking at it.
And as the board had directed, requested when we had our strategy sessions, we did spend a considerable amount of time talking to the association about the board's desire to see an incremental movement in the amount of single premium health insurance. But in this case, increasing the single premium amount by, let's say, $15, so we'll go from $25 a month to $40. The impact on family insurance premium is much greater than that. And so the negotiating team, given the survey that they administered to their membership prior to starting negotiation, their membership said that they wanted to preserve their premium payment and plan features to the extent possible status quo. So the consequence, the negotiating team for the teachers made a conscious decision to settle for less of an increase on the base of $950 as a somewhat quid pro quo, if you will, for not agreeing to the district's proposal to increase single premium rates because of the domino effect on family. But I think Susie and Joyce can attest that that was an issue that we did discuss at considerable length, and they know it will be not the last time that we bring it back for conversation.
Any other questions for Adrian? Hearing none, do I hear a motion that we accept the CFEA contract?
So moved.
Been moved by Joyce and second by Susie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have a facility update.
And it's going to be a quick facility update. Timing of facilities as we move through, this is going to be crucial as we look at the calendar, we look at how do we want to sequence all of the different additions and building of a new building. Our hope is to have the new elementary open potentially August of 2018. Very, very aggressive timeline. That's a little over about 26 to 28 months. The hope would be that means we'd have to have site work, dirt work that would be done this fall to be able to get some things in place to be able to move forward with that. Construction bids would be the same for all of them as far as the new elementary, Orchard Hill and North Cedar, and that would probably be in the spring of this upcoming year, knowing that the design is going to take that long, and then construction would start hopefully about the same time for all of those. North Cedar, we know, it just is the smallest, least expensive of the projects, least square footage, but it's the most complicated because we're going to have students attending parts of the building. We're going to have to renovate. We're going to have to add on. We're going to have to move students. We're going to have to renovate. We're going to have to add on. We're going to have to move students. And that's just going to be challenging with students in the building, similar to what we did at the junior highs a few years ago. Orchard Hill's a little bit more simplistic because it's everything to the north, so you can kind of section off the sections of the building and not have kids go through or worry about moving kids. It's all going to be added to the north, and obviously the new elementary is going to be a little bit easier once we have the site development and the site graded, then it's just the construction at that site. So hopefully sequencing will go the way we hope. Hopefully the weather will cooperate, but we do know that hopefully August of 18 a new elementary will be open. That'll save us costs as far as adding portables and doing some other things. But that's going to be crucial to then get the site work done, hopefully this fall. So that's going to be something we're going to try to move forward with fairly quickly.
That's a good update.
Questions, I guess. a lot of moving parts right now.
I know that teachers are excited. We had a meeting tonight with the PEP Wellness Committee, and they're already looking forward to.
They want dirt moving tomorrow.
Well, they're excited about the spaces
They are.
that they're going to have now.
It's unbelievable. When you talk to people at North Cedar, they know
Yeah.
based on the renovation to the other parts of the building what's coming.
Right.
People have seen what happens and what's taking place in Southdale, what's taking place in Hanson, and again, they're ready for
So
what
again, a
opportunities.
huge thank you to our community for supporting this.
Huge thank you.
Yeah.
Very huge.
Yeah, our teachers, our students will really benefit. Great.
Were you hold off until closer to, not 8 of 18, but closer to down the road to look at a boundary review, just because we don't know what growth and stuff will happen out in that area till?
We will probably, and it's something that we'll have to discuss as a board, but probably start looking at bringing back the consultant to make sure that our enrollment numbers are accurate. So we're due, and we said every 2 years we'll do that. So the hope would be that we'll bring back RSP probably this fall and do that check, so we can come back in the spring and start looking, are the boundaries accurate, so we can start informing parents. Because by the time it's already 2017, we should have a fairly accurate number for this opening of 2018. That 12-month window, hopefully we'll know at least what that'll somewhat look like. Because I think if we do that too late and then try to notify people in spring of 2018, that's a little bit too condensed of a timeline.
Just don't want to do it too early, because I
No.
think a lot will happen in a year out there.
It's a balancing. It really is. I think that area is really going to grow quickly. Everything that I've heard. Yes.
Okay, Andy, continue with the superintendent report.
A couple different items. The retirement reception, we certainly invite all board members at Pheasant Ridge, May 25th, 4 p.m. Commencement, May 22nd, 2016. We do have Mr. Hassman and Dr. Kenyon that will be there. Very exciting opportunity. Administrative board retreat, June 8th, and that starts at 9:30.
And how long will that go?
We have down about 12:30, I believe. We'll eat lunch together and be done.
Okay, any questions, comments, or concerns from the board members?
Yeah, I had a question. Can somebody just give us a rundown on what's being talked about for changes to 7th grade, vis-a-vis the electives and the exploratory stuff?
Well, I can take the first shot at that one and then turn it over to Dan. One of the discussions we are reviewing, and it's a combination of multiple different factors, is to look at how we're offering exploratories, what we're doing for electives, and what is the framework for 7th grade as well as 8th grade, and part of that ties into how do we ensure that we're doing the right work at the right time to ensure kids have those, what you heard tonight, are essential learnings for their movement through our system. So we know that some meetings have already taken place. We've already had some meetings with our department chairs to start that work. We have some areas that will be fairly challenging with some discussions that we'll walk through to help people understand that some of the components that maybe were tight in the past need to look at exploratories. They might not be mandatory in nature, and there's going to be some movement potentially with some curriculum and some expectations within some of those curriculums to fit the needs of kids. Is that a fair?
Good way to pronounce it.
Is this something we do periodically? I'm kind of wondering.
You know, I would say yes, but maybe not to this
I guess
extent.
what was the impetus for making changes?
Well, I think there's a number of things. I think, there's a real emphasis right now on more STEM. That you look at trying to, how do we add more of those things? The board has talked about adding world language at both of the 7th and 8th grade. So when you look at those things and you think about the limited amount of time we have in a day, what's going to fit and what isn't going to fit, what are we going to require all kids to be a part of, and what are we going to have as part of our elective or exploratory. So, I think it's just a re-looking at all of those. We spent the better part of the last year and a half looking at other schools our size. What are they doing at the junior high level, the 7th and 8th grade specifically? What do they require? What do they expose kids to, and what do we and what don't we? So, we're just in the beginning stages of that. We've let people know that any changes won't be made until the 17-18 school year. So as we're looking at this, next fall, we'll get a little bit more serious in engaging all of our junior high staff on what's that schedule going to look like for kids at the 7th and the 8th grade level.
And don't underestimate that this will be an emotional process, as a lot of times it is, but it will be an opportunity to really look at what are our essential learnings and how do we ensure the kids get the right exposure at the right time with the right classes.
Are parents going to get to weigh in?
We haven't mapped out the exact process by any means, but that's a good thought. We'll have to look at that.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, thank you.
Good stuff.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? I suggest we take a 3-minute break before we come back.
Do we adjourn first?
For close
Do I need to
session.
make the motion now, or?
Maybe when we come back.
Okay.
So is the motion to adjourn or?
Do we adjourn first?
I think it's well,
We're talking about a 3-minute
No, we
break.
don't adjourn till after. Don't adjourn till
yeah,
the
so
very
probably
end.
a motion to go to closed session, and then we'll
That'll
take a
work.
3-minute break.
That'll work.
Okay.
As we clear the room.
I move that the Cedar Falls Board of Education enter into closed session to evaluate the professional competency of an individual whose appointment, hiring, performance, or discharge is being considered when necessary to prevent needless and irreparable injury to that individual's reputation, and that individual requests a closed session 2011 Code of Iowa 21.5 LI. 1I. It's one.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mr. Hassman,
Yes.
Mrs. Hines,
Yes?
Mr. Kenyon,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Lieber,
Yes.
and Dr. Shaw.
Yes.
I'd ask anybody not associated with this closed session to please leave.